Oh, here we go. All right, looks like we're recording. Okay, so the electric vehicle revolution. What I want to do is kind of go through and talk a little bit about um, what's coming in the future here. So let's get started. First thing, quick little story for you. So I gave this presentation 2 years ago, and I think Jack was there and maybe a couple others. A lot of this looks similar, but there's been quite a few changes. So I added a little bit to this presentation because so much is changing. And I was actually just making changes right before 10 minutes before we started, because this is a constantly evolving and changing topic. So some of this stuff's going to look familiar, Jack. Some of it's going to be a little different. But a quick little story for you. So I am a child of the 90s. I am considered a millennial, which is a hated term. A lot of people don't like that. I consider myself more of a I'm what they term an elder millennial or an Xennial, because I'm right on the line between Gen X and millennial. Like, I didn't grow up with a smartphone. I used to play outside as a kid instead of, having a phone in my hand all the time. So I'm kind of like in this weird line. But if you were a child of the 90s, you may have had this poster hanging on your wall. This one is of a Lamborghini Countach. Does 0 to 60 in about 4.7 seconds, has a top speed of 183 miles per hour. It's got a mid-mounted 5.2 liter V12 engine, rear wheel drive, gets 7 miles to the gallon. And the name originated from actually the word Countach, which is an exclamation of astonishment in the Piedmontese language. It's basically, they would see this flying by the country roads and essentially yell out, "Holy shit," because it was so quick and so weird looking. But this was the dream car that I always wanted as a kid. This is the car that my parents had out in the driveway. Obviously, we didn't have a Lamborghini, but this is what I grew up in my formative years driving and traveling in. This is a Ford Excursion. It's got a V10 engine, weighs 7,200 pounds, 12 miles per gallon. Okay. This was our family truckster. We went camping with this. We towed with this. We would do all kinds of adventures in this vehicle. It was large. It was massive. It was heavy. It was the largest SUV built at the time. And it got 12 miles to the gallon. My grandfather, this was his family vehicle. It's a 1908 Ford Model T, the old Tin Lizzies. Has a 2.9 liter inline four, 20 horsepower, 45 mile per hour top speed, but it got 25 miles to the gallon. So what happened? How did we go from vehicles that could carry the whole family and get 25 miles to the gallon to one that got 12? Well, we're Americans. We like our comforts. If you notice, this car doesn't even have windows or sides. We wanted heat. We wanted safety. We wanted comfort. So, our vehicles got bigger. They got heavier. We added in these conveniences. But ultimately, what was propelling these vehicles hasn't really changed at all. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. My family is all from Detroit, Michigan, Metro Detroit. I'm a kid with Detroit dreams. Like, when I grew up, we'd go to our grandparents' house and, it's a nice summer day. Everybody would come over to visit when we were there. We didn't sit around the kitchen table talking politics and what was the best, books that we had read. We went out in the driveway and opened the hood on somebody's car and started talking about horsepower numbers and torque and 0 to 60 times. We'd get in the cars and drive, and do drag races, for quarter mile times on the local streets. Like, that was what we did. So I grew up with wanting these types of cars. This was what I was all about as a kid. I loved cars. I had Matchbox cars. I had a Ford T-Bird Matchbox I carried around from the age of 2 and still kept it in my pocket all the way through my middle school years. And I'd run it all over, banisters and play with it in class and everything. I was obsessed with driving and with cars. So what do I drive now? Thinking kid of Detroit dreams, like, you must drive a pretty slick car. Is it this? The Lamborghini? No, I hate to break it to you. I don't know about anybody else that works at SUNY Delhi. I don't have the funds to buy that. Or is it this? Obviously, it's the one on the right. All right, a little Chevy Bolt hatchback. And which doesn't look like it's the coolest car, but I'm going to talk about why it's pretty cool and kind of go from there. So let's get into it. Why do I drive that Chevy Bolt? Well, the reason is because of them. My kids are the reason I drive a Chevy Bolt. For me, the important thing is that I have a vehicle that is going to help contribute to making their futures better. What inspired me in this? It's this guy. If you've ever, again, children of the 90s have seen this show called Captain Planet. Basically, it's about an action superhero who was created to, use his natural powers of earth, wind, fire to save the planet from polluters and so on. And he did it with a very diverse cast of Planeteers you can see below him. That's what kind of inspired me, which ultimately ended up leading to my future career choice, which is, I like working in the outdoors. That's why I commute from Binghamton to SUNY Delhi every day. So I can do this, so I can work outside, I can teach in a natural environment. I can go through and lead my students and encourage them to love and appreciate the outdoors. So that way they'll more likely want to, vote to save the planet. Or when it comes time, even though they may have been, from the city originally, my hope is that, well, maybe they'll end up being inspired that when a vote comes up on, adding land to the Adirondack Park or strengthening watershed, protections, that they're going to vote in favor of those things. Yes, they may never go kayaking again, but maybe at least they're going to think back to their time paddling down the West Branch with me and have some fond memories and vote in favor of the environment. That's part of why I do what I do. Part of the reason. So again, I like to think of myself. I always like this meme. This is how I like to think of myself. In reality, this is not, what I do. I mean, for the most part, I'm herding cats, like what you can see in the bottom right-hand picture. That's really what my job entails. But I think it's important. I think it's valuable, and I enjoy what I do. I do this in my, private time as well, my fun time. I take my family along with us, and we all travel in the outdoors and experience these things. So because of that, and because, again, kids and family and, I'm an elder millennial, but I still have a long time to go on this planet. I feel very, strongly obligated to protect our planet, which is why my dream car has gone from a Lamborghini to this, a Tesla Model 3. So today we're going to talk about why that is. We're going to cover what is an electric vehicle, why did I choose one, some facts versus myths, which there's a lot of myths out there, including one that just came into my inbox 10 minutes before I started. Charging, battery degradation, lack of EV promotion, what can you do, all right? And is an EV right for you? And we're going to talk a little bit about the future of EVs. So a little background again on why things need to change. Here's ultimately something that is not in dispute. Every gallon of gas burned, doesn't matter if it's burned in that Lamborghini or if it's burned in that Ford Excursion or if it's burned in a Toyota Prius, every gallon of gas burned releases 19 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, okay? Some of that is, if you have a vehicle that has less, efficiency, it's getting 12 miles per gallon as opposed to a Prius's 50, you're going to obviously use more gasoline to go the same distance. Therefore, you're, spewing more carbon into the atmosphere to do the same work, okay? But that is not in dispute. 19 pounds of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. And I remember as a kid, asking my dad, he used to open the garage door and then back the cars out of the garage. And I was pretty young, and I remember seeing him do this. And I'm like, Dad, why don't you just warm the car up in the garage? Why don't, why do you back it out and open the garage for everything else? And he said, well, if we didn't, I would die because the gas can build up in the garage and kill you. And I said, so the stuff coming out of the tailpipe could kill people? And he's like, yeah. And I said, all right, well, why is it okay to back it out of the garage and just dump it into the air around us? Isn't that bad for other people? And he kind of looked at me and he sort of stared off into space for a minute and then did one of those things that I'm sure many of us parents have done, which was, well, everybody does it. And that's just, that's the reason why. Back in the early 90s, he didn't really have a, reason to or a way to explain it to me as a kid, why this was bad. I mean, ultimately, we've been treating our atmosphere like a sewer. We dump not only carbon dioxide, but many other gases as a result of living our lives. And We know this is a problem. It's an issue. Again, I don't advise anybody ever run their car in an enclosed garage, but think of that analogy. Like, think of the earth as just a larger garage, and we have millions of cars, millions of buildings that are using fossil fuels and pumping them out into the atmosphere right now in order to maintain our quality of life that we currently have. So obviously this leads to climate change. I'm not going to show you this video or go through it. If you don't really think climate change is an issue, I'm not going to change your mind here in these 5 minutes. It's not really worth it to do that. And that's not really, here. I put this on here just because I do give this talk in other places. But ultimately, I like this Bill Nye quote because we have to understand that to confront climate change, we have to embrace 2 ideas. He said, first, we need to understand that we're all in this together, okay? The second is the longest journey begins with a simple step. And for many of us, that simple step is kind of scary to take, or we're afraid to take that. But ultimately, it's going to depend on all of us making some different choices in order to prevent or lessen the effects of climate change. I don't always have a lot of hope that that's going to happen. But here's the thing. I'm not in here to argue about whether climate change is real or not. This is a cartoon I like because it kind of emphasizes the point. What if it's all a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Okay. I'm here to say that right now, in terms of the transportation sector, an electric vehicle, yes, does less plant damage to the planet. We're going to talk about some of the myths around the fact that maybe it doesn't, or that it causes more damage. That's not true. We'll get to that in a minute. But the other thing I want to talk about is the fact that it is just an all-around better vehicle. It's a better option than a gas-powered vehicle. And that's really what I want to cover today. So again, we're trying to prevent more scenes like this. I had to change this. 2 years ago, it was Australia. Last month when I had this on, it was pictures of California burning. This is from Colorado in the last week. This is what is getting worse if we don't change some of our ways. So let's talk about some of the steps you can take. One of the simplest ones, there are multiple forms of electrified vehicles. A hybrid, including this Toyota Prius on the left here, it's been around for over 20 years. This is a simple step. It's the first step, and it's a step that many people have already taken. I'm sure some of the people watching this have ridden in a hybrid car, driven or owned a hybrid car. This is the simplest step that one can take and is one of the easiest. It basically tries to use a larger battery pack in the car, not very big, but a battery pack that's designed to recoup energy from that normally we would lose when we slow down, all right, and come to a complete stop. It puts that energy into a battery. It uses what's called regenerative braking to do that, stores that energy in a battery, and then when person drives and takes off from a stop, that power is then used to drive the wheels as opposed to using the gasoline to get it up to speed. So again, that's the hybrid car. That's basically the essence of what this car is, in simple terms. They're more fuel efficient because of those techniques and methods. They're complicated, but they've been around for over 20 years. So now we've gotten to this point where these vehicles have, proven themselves pretty well. A lot of people were worried, oh, these batteries in these cars are going to die in a very short period of time. Don't keep it for very long, get rid of it. There are Toyota Priuses driving around with 500,000 miles on them that are over 20 years old and that are still on the original batteries. So that myth has kind of been busted. And we're going to go through that more with regular electrics here as well. A little better step than a hybrid, just a straight hybrid, is a plug-in electric hybrid. This operates in the same way as a hybrid, but it now has a larger battery pack, which will provide additional power so that the car, instead of just using electricity to start rolling, it may be able to maintain that through 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour and all electric for, somewhere between 20 to 30 miles of range, sometimes 40 miles of range before the battery runs out. Then it switches to operating like a traditional gasoline engine car. Again, that's a little bit of a better step. I mean, when you think about cars in general, we're an all gas powered car. What you're doing is, it seems kind of crazy. And we've all done it our entire lives, that we've owned cars, driven in cars, ridden in cars, but we're basically creating micro explosions within an engine block that sits directly in front of us we're controlling those explosions through pistons and transmissions and getting them to our wheels. They're very inefficient. It's a very inefficient way of driving. And then when we need to stop, we slam on the brakes, and then we create more energy loss through friction and heat that's being expelled through the brakes, as well as all that heat that's coming out the exhaust and off the engine. It's really a very inefficient way of driving, just in general. Hybrids and plug-in hybrids kind of alleviate that a little bit to an extent. But the thing is, they're complicated. The best step is what's known as
what was that car that you just showed us?
Back, that on the left is what's called a Ford Fusion plug-in electric hybrid. This car is no longer in production. However, used examples are out there and for very affordable prices. Yeah, and I should also mention, if at any time anyone has a question at all, please chime in, let me know. I can't see hands being raised or anything. I tried to minimize the screen, so just unmute and let me know if you have any questions at all. But yeah, Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid. My brother actually owns one of these and loves it. It's a great vehicle, very reliable. You can also get them with all-wheel drive even, because I know that's an important thing for most of us in upstate New York. Other questions on that? Okay, so battery electric vehicles are really the best option, because if you look at, again, those diagrams up in the top, you can kind of see how complicated those were versus a battery electric. Battery electrics have a larger battery. They have a drive motor with one moving part, and then it basically goes through a suspension system and everything else like a normal car. But the drivetrains themselves are simplified significantly. To kind of show an example of this, the vehicle on the left is a Toyota RAV4 plug-in prime hybrid. My dad just purchased this a couple of months ago. It has about 40 miles of range. It has all-wheel drive. And I think in normal gas driving situations, if it was running purely on gas, it's about 40 miles to the gallon. So it's pretty good. It's an SUV, small crossover vehicle. The one on the right is a Tesla Model 3. And as you can see, quite a bit simpler. Okay, that's the storage space. We call that the frunk. Extra storage in there. You can put duffel bags and stuff, as opposed to that plug-in prime hybrid on the left. That's ultimately the difference here, is a whole bunch of stuff crammed under the hood, very little crammed under the hood. There is a motor under there. There's up in the top left corner, there is a little washer fluid area, but really not a lot. All right, much simpler design, but yeah, that's where we add washer fluid. So again, why choose electric only? I have friends and family who have bought plug-in hybrids and regular hybrids, and the plug-in hybrids especially. A lot of them have discovered that they never use the gas for regular driving. My dad purchased plug-in prime hybrid because he didn't want to, he was worried about traveling and charging and everything else, and he's really discovered that, yeah, we never use gas, and even on trips we could get away without using gas too. So they do, most people take that step as kind of a baby step and then realize, oh, I could have just gone straight electric. Electrics are a little better in terms of, cleaner energy, cheaper to run and maintain, and they have zero exhaust emissions. They're not new. This is really important to understand. They are not a new concept. Back in the early 1900s, gas-powered cars and electric cars were being developed at the same time. Ultimately, the reason gas-powered cars took off was because Henry Ford realized that in rural areas, they weren't very likely to have electricity at home, which he realized electric cars would most ideally be charged at home, and not very many people had electricity available at home. It wasn't until FDR in the 1930s and then all the programs that were pushed out to bring electricity to rural areas that we had that. So he thought it would be easier to install gas stations near towns. One centralized fueling stop for a gas-powered vehicle would mean that we could sell Model Ts to a lot more people. And we know how Ford, ultimately with the moving assembly line, developed and made our modern car era. And that was the reason why they took that route. But again, their EVs have been around. The picture in the middle there is an example of an EV1, which was developed by GM in the mid-90s. very popular car with the people that were leasing them at the time. They were expensive to build. They didn't have really great range, only about 100 miles of range, but they were very quick. They were fun. There's lots of videos if you go on and you can see like Tom Hanks ranting and raving about his EV1. The other thing is, GM has built a Chevy Bolt like what I own, and they also built the 1971 Lunar Rover, which is sitting up on the moon right now. That was also a battery electric vehicle. So again, the technology is not really new. It has been greatly improved. So let's kind of go through that a little bit. We've gone from, in the modern era, thinking of electric cars as that on the left, those little gem cars. When I was at Cortland, we used to see those things all over, and I thought they were the coolest thing. It's like, these things are silent. My friends and I did hop on one and drive it around a couple of times, and it was very quick and fun. Most of these are used around golf course resorts and that type of thing, and they're silent, they're fun, they're quick, but they top out at like 25 miles an hour. So that's what most people still have in their head as an electric car, weak, underpowered golf cart. We've gone from that to this, a Tesla Model S Plaid that'll do 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds and crazy acceleration, 400 miles of range. It's completely changed our perception of electric cars. So I do have another video here, but again, it takes a little time. I'm trying to keep moving along, but let's talk a little bit about electric cars. So why did I ultimately choose an EV? First thing was total cost of ownership. I don't care if, again, you don't think climate change is real, you don't believe in it, okay, fine. But if you're a conservative, you should be driving an electric car from the pure stance of cost of ownership. We're going to do a breakdown here in a minute. Cost of ownership for me was the number one reason for buying an electric car. I commute from Binghamton to Delhi every day. It's 150 miles round trip. I needed something that was a much more efficient way of driving. My car before the electric car was a Ford Fiesta that was 7 years old and had 200,000 miles on it. Got 40 miles to the gallon. Great car, but my electric cars are still cheaper to drive than that, even factoring in purchasing the more expensive electric car. So we're going to break that down for you. Again, liberal, conservative, I think we can all, it doesn't matter. If you want a cheaper way to drive, EV is the way to go. I also bought an electric car for driving enjoyment and comfort, smooth, quiet acceleration. It's just a much easier vehicle to drive and a much more fun vehicle to drive. I also liked the electronics and technology integration. That was another reason for buying one, as well as time savings, which I'll go into. The other big thing for me is I'm an American. I support the idea of American-built cars, which are affordable and available. I also believe that with our fuel as well. Again, I grew up at a time and came of age when we were getting into wars over oil, and it was very important that we protect oil resources. And for me, I always used to think, well, this is, it upset me that we used to have to, worry about that. The beauty of an electric car is we can get our fuel domestically, in many cases for cheap or free, and it's renewable because we have renewable ways of getting electricity. The other thing for me is these cars are the excitement of driving the future. I mean, that's really a big part of it. I'm excited to be driving a vehicle that is now all over the news. 2 years ago, they were starting to make it. Never saw a commercial for an EV, but now there are commercials. There's people talking about it on the nightly news. It's everywhere, and that's exciting to me. The other big thing, again, is American made. A lot of my family work in the auto industry in Detroit. They work on the lines. My grandfather was a tool and die maker on the Ford line. I've had other cousins and aunts and uncles who have worked on the assembly lines, and all the way up to a cousin who was the CEO of a major parts supplier company for the big three. Like, I have the whole range of relatives out there who work in the automotive industry. And I want to support them. I want to support American built. These two cars in this picture here, Tesla Model 3 and the Tesla Model Y. Had a lot of people who, again, some of the myths, people will yell, out at me, your car's made in China and that type of thing. Interesting fact, that blue Model 3 sitting there is the most American-made car by parts content in the world. In the country. Most American-made. All of the parts, the batteries, are assembled, built, and made in America. It's a very high percentage, highest percentage. That car in the background is a Tesla Model Y. That is the third most American-made car this last year. Number 2 was the Ford Mustang. So first and third most American-made vehicle by parts content were Teslas, okay? EVs. So that's another reason I drive these. Again, my other big rationale, it's better for the environment, ultimately. So this is how I started off my EV adventure. 2 years ago when I gave this presentation, it was about this car. It's a 2019 Chevy Bolt. I purchased it in September of 2019. I've driven it about 35,000 miles. Goes 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, 238 miles of range, and has a 50 kilowatt max charging speed. And then in March, I'm living that dream. Remember that dream car, that Tesla Model 3? I got kind of close. We bought this. This was a Tesla Model Y. Some people will joke and say that this is the middle-aged man's Model 3. It's a little bigger. It's about 10% bigger. It's a crossover. It's a little more family friendly. It's kind of like the Model 3 is you when you were in your 20s and had your six-pack, and now you're in your 40s, you got a beer gut and you got to transport a whole bunch of kids. You have this Model Y. So this we bought to replace our last gas-powered vehicle. And when I say last, I mean like last ever. We will not be buying another gas-powered vehicle. I can guarantee that. This car seats 7 people. It has 3 rows. It's a crossover hatchback, has all-wheel drive, does 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds, has a range of 326 miles, and a max charge speed of 250 kilowatts. This is our family travel vehicle. So we purchased this back in March. We were very fortunate. It's one of those things of the pandemic was that we were able to save a significant amount of money because no one could go anywhere or do anything. So for us, we were fortunate that we still had paychecks through this time, and we were able to save a lot of money and ultimately purchase this car. Then we decided to continue the dream, and I finally bought my actual dream car, which is this 2022 Tesla Model 3 long range. We bought it in December. It has all-wheel drive, does 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, range of 358 miles, and again, that 250 kilowatt max charge speed. We decided to move on from our Chevy Bolt because after driving the Tesla, it was just like, it was so much more enjoyable for me to drive. I love the Bolt. It was a great car, but I decided we were ready to move into this vehicle, and it kind of worked out timing wise that we were able to do that and buy this second car. So let's kind of break it down. We're really now at this point where our whole family is getting into the EV adventure. Our kids are excited about it. And I don't know, let me move this over so you can see here. That's my son. Whoop, let me go back. It's kind of hard to see, but that's our son sitting in the lower trunk well. People ask me, oh, how do you fit so much stuff in that car? And it's like, well, there's no gas tank. And because there's no gas tank, we're able to go through and basically, that's storage down there. So the kids love getting in there and hiding out. So that's where my son was. But it's not only our immediate kids and family, we also have the rest of my family buying cars. So my brother's Chevy Bolt, our Chevy Bolt and our Model Y, and then my mom and dad own that Toyota plug-in Prime, and they also have this all-electric Ford Focus as well. So, and I know people are like, well, all right, how do you afford these cars? So again, conservatives, liberals, we don't agree on much, but this is something I can help you understand. I think we can all agree we like to save money. This is how two teachers, we're not rich, we don't make tons of money. A lot of people have that misconception that, oh, you must be some rich son of a gun, I hate you, blah, blah, blah. There is a lot of hate directed at us. That's one thing I don't like about owning these cars is, yes, people try to cold roll us and flip us off, and which is ironic. They're driving past me, blowing coal on me from a $100,000 lifted diesel pickup truck. And my car cost a third of what theirs does, but that's the way it is. I own this car because over the life of the vehicle, and this is key for people to understand, over the life of the vehicle, the total cost of ownership is cheaper. They're cheaper to fuel up. They're simpler machines with less moving parts, which means less to go wrong, as well as cheaper repairs. They require very little maintenance. Regenerative braking means that you really don't do work on the brakes. We're going to talk about what that is in a minute, but you basically don't do any work on brake work And then the big thing is, especially going forward now, I would highly advise if you are thinking of buying a car at any point here in the next year or 2 or 3, you really should very strongly consider buying an electric purely on resale value or trade-in value. The reason is that as these cars become more popular, they are going to become, gas-powered vehicles are going to look less and less appealing. Their value is going to tank. And I'm not being over dramatic on this. It is true. There are studies that show this, that you can already see this trend happening. I usually buy a car and keep it for 7 to 10 years and about 200,000 miles, and then I trade or sell it. If you are a person who keeps a car for 2 or 3 years and then trade in, or if you're someone like me who keeps it for longer, you want to have an electric because the resale value is much, much better. That's one cost of ownership that people don't ever usually consider. The value of the car as it pertains to the life of it. So over time, which car ends up being cheaper? The resale on these cars is going to be higher, and you're not going to face as much depreciation. So that's another thing to consider. So let's talk a little bit about questions.
Eric,
Yeah.
did you consider buying a secondhand EV?
So at the time, 2 years ago when we purchased, I looked at it. And again, you know how I was just talking about resale value? The problem was at the time, 2 years ago when I bought, there were Teslas that were out there. Model 3s were in production for already 3 years at that point. The problem was the resale on them was so high, they were more expensive than buying the car new. I was a little hesitant to spend that money up front. I wasn't sure. I was skeptical, like a lot of people, like what about in the winter? How is this going to work with my 150-mile commute? So I didn't want to go all in and spend that money to start. That was why I bought the Chevy Bolt, which had the same issue as the Tesla. The used Chevy Bolts that were out there at the time were only a year or two old. There weren't very many available, and the ones that were cost as much as new. So for me, at that time, buying used wasn't an option. A good option. So I bought the new Chevy Bolt at the time. Now that's still kind of the case, except with the Chevy Bolts, they are getting cheaper. And, I think that's a great used option. You can pick up, like my brother just bought his Chevy Bolt last year in November 2020, and he paid about $15,000 for it. And it had like 30,000 miles on it. So buying used is an option. But other questions on that? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why they're cheaper to fuel up. The cost of electricity is about 1/4 to 1/3 cheaper than gas overall. And now it's actually about 20% of the cost now that gas prices have spiked. When I sold my Ford Fiesta and bought the Chevy Bolt, gas was still around $2.25, $2.30 a gallon. I was saving 1/3. I was spending 1/3 on electricity, of 1/3 of the cost of what I would have spent on gas. The cost can be zero if you're using solar panels or have ownership in a solar farm. You can make your car run on sunshine and you're paying nothing. So it can be even cheaper. The other thing is many municipalities, hotels, restaurants, museums, places of business, private corporations, workplaces, and colleges, SUNY Delhi, hopefully soon here, a lot of them will offer free or low cost charging because it brings people to their locations, which is what they want. They want to get people in there and have a captive audience while the car charges. So a lot of places you can charge for free. In general, my Chevy Bolt, it costs an average of 2 cents to drive a mile in a Chevy Bolt, opposed to my Ford Fiesta. I ran the numbers. It was about 12 cents per mile for my, again, similar sized Ford Fiesta. The other thing to consider is that I would spend $400 or $500 a month on gasoline. And I would see that fluctuate significantly up and significantly down. When it was low, I was spending $400 or $500 a month. Now I'm sure it's probably much higher what I would be spending on gas, because obviously gas prices have gone through the roof. The beauty of electricity is that it stays at a relatively constant rate, as you can see in that chart on the right there. It doesn't fluctuate as much. The other thing, again, is EVs are extremely efficient to fuel and run because 95% of the power makes it to the drive wheels as opposed to only 30% in an ICE-powered car or an internal combustion engine car. So some of you will say, oh, well, where am I supposed to charge this thing? Well, number one, you'll charge at home almost all the time for 90% of your miles. But you don't, oh, I'm out, I'm around, what do I do? There can't be charging available. There is. There's an app for it to help you find it. PlugShare is a great app to utilize. These are city centers, so everything in green is a level 2 charger or connector, which we're going to talk about. Everything in orange is a DC fast charger. The green means you're charging your car. If you went to one of those stations, it's a slow charge where it's going to take, if you had run your car completely to empty and you need to top it back off, my cars, it would take about 6 to 7 hours to do that if I went from completely empty to completely full. Those are at those green charging stations. The orange ones will top up my car in 20 minutes. And as you can see, even here in little old Delhi, we do have a charger in the village. Oneonta has multiple charging locations where you can charge at many cases for free, okay? The other thing that makes these things cheaper to own, they're simpler with less moving parts, less to go wrong, and cheaper repairs, okay? Obviously, you can see the kids are sitting where an engine should be. We have a lot less complication. If you look at the parts, these are all the main components of an electric vehicle, all right? Cooling system, battery, drive unit, that type of thing. It's just a motor with one moving part. These are the parts of a gas-powered engine, just the engine itself. All those parts are moving, and as we know, moving parts leads to failure points, all right? Gas engines have gotten incredibly reliable, and there's no denying that. They are very reliable. It's been a long time since a gas-powered car left me stranded. It happens. I used to drive very old gas-powered vehicles, you know, when I was in high school and college and made no money. And my 20-year-old vehicles, yeah, they would break down, but they were 20 years old and had a couple 100,000 miles. Nowadays, it's not as much of an issue. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Good question here, Cheryl. So I'm just checking the chat. Is it difficult to find mechanics who know electric vehicles? Yes and no. Like the Teslas that we own, they come to me. You schedule through the app, you say, hey, my car's having a problem. A lot of the time they can fix it remotely, which is crazy. A lot of the times if it's a software issue, they can do it that way. Or they send out a mobile unit to you. I have used mobile units once because there was a little rubber seal in my door that was missing. And they're like, oh, we'll send somebody out on a Friday to just pop that little seal in. I don't know if my kids popped it out or whatever. It was nothing major. It was just a minor thing. And they sent a guy to me and did it in my driveway. They can do it at your place of work and so on. But I've never in the 2 years of owning my car needed anything done. So I don't, there are mechanics that can work on them, dealerships that'll work on them, but there isn't really a reason to go necessarily because there's a lot less to go wrong.
Eric, do you mind if I pitch in here for a quick second too?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
We have a Tesla too, and we did have to take care of tires. There is a special thing that they have. They're called pucks. There's 4 pucks that you put under the car. So when it's lifted, it doesn't damage the battery because the lifts would be right against the battery otherwise. So basically there's a place in Binghamton where I also live that they know how to deal with it. So that's where we've gone to get our tires done. So that's really on our end, all we've had to do too. So
yeah, which Tesla do you have, Jess?
we have the 3 and we're hopefully going to be getting a Y this year.
Awesome, excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, those little pucks you can buy on Amazon. I paid about $80 for them. You can also use literally hockey pucks. I've seen people do that. I carried one in my trunk so that if I were to be stranded with a tire issue and I was somewhere, like when we traveled south this summer, I wanted to, you know, lift the car and have it up. I'd have those so anybody with a lift would theoretically be able to lift them. I do my own tire rotations now. I found that I used to take it to my mechanic, and Jess, I don't know who you use, but I use Upfront, which is just down the street from me a little ways. And I could bring it there for him to lift up and, you know, put new tires on my car when the time comes, or when it comes time to rotate tires. But I found the time it would spend for me to drive down there, sit and wait for them to rotate the tires, was actually just quicker for me to use one jack, lift the car up, swap the tires, swap the wheels, and then be on my way. So I actually haven't seen my mechanic in over a year since the last time I was in for an inspection. So It can be done. There are people that will work on them. And most of the times, Jess is right. It's really just tires that you're dealing with. In terms of portable chargers, Cheryl, another good question. There are portable options. There are AAA has these portable chargers they can bring to you. I'm also going to show you some other really cool charging techniques that are being utilized out on the highway. So we'll talk about those as well. Another good question from Tom. Have you ever been inconvenienced or had to plan around or been delayed by waiting to charge the EV? I've driven about 60,000 EV miles. The answer, no. I've never forgotten to plug in. I always set a reminder on my Amazon Alexa every night, like, oh, hey, if you haven't remembered, plug in the car. The cars can also, like my Chevy Bolt would send me a reminder. If it hadn't been plugged in, it would remind me. A lot of EVs have that too as well. They'll send you a text. And in terms of waiting to recharge, the other thing is I have a supercharger just down the street in Binghamton. There is one also in Oneonta. If I had forgotten to charge for some reason, I could drive there and kind of just like a gas station, sit there for about 15 minutes and have more than enough charge to do my 150-mile commute. So I've never been inconvenienced. I've never had to wait on the car. We'll talk about that in a minute. But with the charging now and the way cars work, the technology is only getting better. And no, I have not been inconvenienced. So great question so far. Any others pop up in the chat or again, jump on mute, let me know. And Jess, since you're a Tesla owner as well, if I say something wrong or miss something, please jump in. And we will also have kind of a question and answer period at the end as well. So we'll put that in there. Another good question from Kaylee. Do you have to fully charge every time or is it best to let the battery drain fully? Good question. Generally, you don't charge to 100% on a regular basis. I only charge my cars to 80%. That gives me about 200 miles of range on that 80%. That's for long-term battery health for that reason. The other reason I do it that way is that I still have regenerative braking on cold days like this. When I go downhill, if it's super cold out and you have a full battery, you wouldn't have full regen, and I live on the top of a hill. It's actually better to do what we call ABC, always be charging. I don't run my cars down to zero. If I feel like it, and I'm not commuting to work, when I'm driving the 150 miles every day, and especially in the wintertime, I charge at night, every night. It's habit. I walk in or I pull in my garage, I get out, plug in my car, and I walk away and forget about it. In terms of how they, that's my way of doing it. If I'm not going anywhere, like this week, I'm working from home, so I don't have to do that every night. So if I remember to plug it in, I will. If not, it's not a big deal. In the summertime, I usually will go 2 weeks in between charges because I'm not driving as much. So it really kind of depends. You're not like a slave to having to plug in every night, especially if you're not doing a 150-mile commute like I am. How is it in the snow? All-wheel drive, phenomenal. I always recommend snow tires anyways. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, I have all-wheel drive, that's all I need. They're usually the ones in the ditch. Snow tires are also important. I have never worried about with all-wheel drive it being a problem. My Chevy Bolt with front-wheel drive handled just like a regular front-wheel drive in the snow. The difference being though, because the weight is low, it's less likely to tip over. That's one big advantage. All your weight is down low, and it gives you better traction because your weight is on the axles a little more, and it's a little lower to the ground. So they handle great in the snow. In terms of, again, how simple they are, I mean, really, it's an electric motor, a battery, and a controller that controls that and how well, in the charging. That's pretty much it. So not too complicated really at all. And again, very little maintenance. Like Jess said, really tires are it. I have to rotate my tires every 7,500 miles. And again, I do it on my own. The other thing I have to do is add washer fluid. I've driven 60,000, EV miles, and that's it. Tire rotations, add washer fluid. I love my mechanic, great guy. Steve at Upfront is phenomenal, but I don't miss sitting in the waiting room. Every month I would have to go for an oil change and basic maintenance and timing belts. I mean, there's no exhaust systems, brake systems don't need to be worked on. There's no, what are some of the other problems I had? Coolant leaks I used to have, timing belts, serpentine belts, spark plugs, wires, tune-ups, oil change, air filters, fuel filters, gone. None of that exists in an electric car. So again, it just, for me, from a maintenance side, much better. question from Tom, does it heating in the winter drain a lot of electricity? In the Chevy Bolt, you're decreasing your range by about 30% if you're doing stop and go. Air conditioning in the summer, same thing, Cheryl. About, air conditioning is actually a little less. It's about 10% it hits your range by using the AC. It's different in the Teslas because they utilize what's known as a heat pump, which is like a refrigerator, all right, that's sitting in your house. That is a heat pump. And also, very excitingly, heat pumps for homes, for whole house heating and cooling, amazing topic that's coming up and you'll hear a lot more of down the line. That's my next big push in EV, environmental stuff is towards using heat pumps at home. But the Teslas use those in the cars, which means battery drain in the wintertime. With my new Tesla, I haven't seen, even on the cold days when I was driving in December, I didn't notice a hit in my range. Nothing where I did with the Chevy Bolt.
Eric,
Yeah, question.
you have the long range and we don't. So for the winter time with us, and yours is a couple of years newer, ours is a 2020.
Okay.
With the cold weather, we see a big hit in our battery. Our battery, how many miles we can do on one charge. It definitely decreases it sometimes by like 50 miles.
Yeah.
So that's
have
something
is
you
it
can
2020 you said?
precondition of 2020. Yep.
Okay.
You can do like for everybody else, like you can precondition your battery, like you can tell your car to like wake up an hour before you're going to leave, and that like warms up your battery, and you're already plugged into your house or your charger, so that part that you might lose, you can sort of offset that if you know you're going on a trip. So there is that balance too. Like it's not like you're definitely like right off the bat losing 50. There's different ways that you can mitigate that for sure. But that heat pump we were just before that heat pump came out.
Yeah.
So I bet that made a nice difference for you too. But with the having less miles as well, you definitely feel it more.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I advise people. And again, kind of talking about new versus used. If you're looking at replacing your gas-powered car and you only want to have one car, like the Chevy Bolt is a great vehicle for around town, but kind of I was in the same situation as Jess. This was a shorter range car, and it had what's known as resistive heaters, which a lot of us have had in our homes. That is a very inefficient way to heat. Again, the heat pumps that have been installed have kind of mitigated that. But yes, the standard range car, and unfortunately, Jess, you just missed that probably by a few months in terms of when the heat pumps were put into Teslas.
It was so sad.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the unfortunate reality of it. But again, it is a very good car still. And like Jess said, there are ways to mitigate it. We're going to talk about that as well. And yeah, Cheryl, great point. Yeah, for someone who doesn't travel far or often, it's a phenomenal option. In terms of an effect on insurance for having an EV, yes, my insurance went up I have State Farm. It went up about, on my Teslas, it went up about $17 a month. And the reason is it was a brand new, much more expensive vehicle than my Ford Fiesta. So that was a big thing, was it's more about the expense of the vehicle over the car I drove before. So it does have an effect. But in terms of repairs and things like that, yes, I would imagine the other problem is it's harder to get parts because they are relatively new. But yeah, so that's heating, and there are ways to, again, mitigate winter range, and we're going to talk about that some more as well. One of the other things to consider as well is this regenerative braking means you don't have to get brakes done. It's, again, kind of using the electric motors as a generator. So when you're going, you're using the electric motors to power the car and make it move forward. When you slow down, the car will apply the motor in reverse, have it spin in reverse, and it will regen that what would have been wasted power, that wasted energy, back into the battery. So a lot of the times, if you drive a vehicle in town or in the city, you will get phenomenally better efficiency than if you were driving highway the whole way, because you're in a lot more stop and go traffic. It's phenomenal, the efficiency difference. So amazing difference in terms of that regen braking, really phenomenal. Again, we already kind of mentioned resale value is extremely high. That's part of why buying used is not always great right now. But I know people who have bought new, decided to trade up, and right now the car market's a little insane, but there are people who are buying Teslas, keeping them for 6 months or a year, and selling them for a $5,000 profit over what they paid. That's not going to continue, but the resale value will still remain high. Steve, good question. How much is it for you to pay for charging at a charging station that isn't free? It depends on your rate of charge. If you have a slow charge, and I'm going to get into this a little bit, generally at a supercharger, which is the fastest way to charge, you're topped off in like 20 minutes. Can be anywhere from 28 cents a kilowatt hour up to about 34 cents a kilowatt hour is the most expensive I've seen. And you have you're adding maybe 40 kilowatt hours at a time. So you can kind of extrapolate that cost out. If you're at a slow charger, like a level 2, if they do charge, if it's not free, usually it's about the standard electric rate of like 12 cents a kilowatt hour. How much has your electric bill gone up at home? Good question again. It's kind of hard because I also have been switching my entire house over to electric. So we added in an electric hot water tank, took out a gas one, put in an electric one, and we all kind of did it around the same time as buying the cars. My electric bill, if you were to, for both of my vehicles, it's gone up about $100 a month, and that's for about 3,000 to 4,000 miles of driving. Again, on a regular basis. So 3,000 to 4,000 miles in a month between both of our cars, we've gone up about $100 a month. So yeah, so it does go up, but that 3,000 to 4,000 miles of driving on gas used to cost me, when it was cheap, $400 or $500 a month. So $500, $100, like it's a huge difference. But good questions. Some other things here to consider or think about. I kind of went through back when I was buying my Chevy Bolt, and I wanted to look at, again, usually 7 years of ownership, 175,000 mile comparison. I really liked the Subaru Crosstrek for all-wheel drive, more of an outdoor lifestyle, really good in the snow. My Chevy Bolt is only front-wheel drive, but otherwise they're pretty comparable in terms of size and price, as you can see. So what I did is I did a little breakdown, did all the calculations, and figured out, again, total cost of ownership. Now, this doesn't include insurance and things like that, and it doesn't include the resale loss. Again, that depreciation is an important number to remember that a lot of people forget. How much is my car depreciating? I didn't factor in depreciation. I just factored in basically how much is it going to cost to fuel and to maintain. And at the time, I was paying about 7 cents per kilowatt hour at home. So I factored out and figured out these numbers. I did buy my Chevy Bolt. There was a New York State rebate available, which is still available to cars that are priced under $42,000. If you were to buy a brand new electric car under $42,000, you get $2,000 taken off the top by New York State. And in certain cars you can buy, you can also get a $7,500 tax credit at the federal level, even though that is quickly and rapidly disappearing for many car companies. It's already gone for Teslas and GM. I was able to get that credit in half, so I did get almost $4,000 back in my taxes the year that I bought my Chevy Bolt. But there's kind of the breakdown. Subaru Crosstrek, just to fuel and maintain, $45,000, $400 to drive 7 years and 175,000 miles. The Chevy Bolt, $27,500 in terms of buying, purchasing, and fueling and everything else. So that's that. Let's keep going here. Whoop, sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. Where am I? Again, I haven't been on this back again. Let me go back. That. Okay, now we're back. Can everybody see that again? Sorry about that. Okay, so question here. Oh, sorry, Jack. Sorry to see you go. Thanks, Jack. So again, these vehicles have gotten cheaper and are ultimately cheaper to maintain. My other reason for buying this car, again, driving enjoyment and comfort. They are very fast. They have a low center of gravity. They're great for handling. You go into the curves, like when I drive 357 and County Road 14, I enjoy driving. I love to drive those roads in my electric cars because they just swoop into the curves because the weight is low. The battery's in the floor. The motors are low. They hug the road. They're extremely fast. They have instant torque, which is addictive. There's no gear shifting. There's no motor revving up. You just press, it's not the gas pedal anymore. It's the go pedal or the accelerator. And you just fly. It's insane. And they're fast, they're powerful, they're fun. One pedal driving, which is again regen braking. When I let off the accelerator, the car starts to slow down. I never touch the brake pedal, or very rarely, unless it's an emergency stop and I need to, stop for a deer or something. Most of the time, I coast to a stop, and I'm regenning the whole way and extending my range. So that one pedal driving is very fun. They're smooth. There's no vibrations or harsh noises. It's silent when it cruises. And again, they are extremely fast. All right. So let me show you a little example of that as well. So we're going to go ahead and pull this up and move this down. So how fast are they? Well, here's a little video for you.
Behind me is the new Tesla Model S Plaid, the fastest production car in the entire world. To show you guys how truly fast the Plaid is, I'm going to be gathering a whole bunch of random strangers and my friends, putting them in the passenger seat and filming their reactions under full throttle acceleration. Smash that subscribe button, guys. Grab some popcorn. Give a big old thumbs up on the video. These things are about to get hilarious. Phone hit your chin?
So again, that's just one example of how these cars are fun to drive and how things go. So it really is incredibly fun to drive and to feel that sensation of driving. So a lot of fun and so much. But again, oh, yep, Depot. Yeah. So this is another thing Steve brought up here. Currently, there's a charging station at Depot Street, free at this point. 2 chargers can charge on it. It is phenomenal. And that's one that I actually used to use all the time with my Chevy Bolt. We're going to show some pictures of that in a minute. There's tons of examples of Teslas and how fast they are and how much fun they are to drive. And if you ever get a chance, to ride in one, which what I would have liked to have done is done this in person and then taken people for rides. They are a lot of fun to ride in, to drive in, and so forth, because they're so quick, that instant torque. The other thing is the electronics in these cars and the technology integration is amazing. So EVs and new companies like Tesla do a really good job of integrating technology into the car, and technology equals software. Tesla is a really good example of this. They're more of a tech company than they were a car company kind of to start. And so they're really good at integrating that, then a little better than traditional ICE-powered cars. Software also allows for efficient power usage and integration of new safety technologies, seamless connection of multiple technologies and media inputs into our connected lives. For example, I don't have a video of it, but I used to, Jess had mentioned preheating her car before she would get in. I could, with my Chevy Bolt, while I was in the shower, tell my Amazon Alexa to turn on and warm up my car in the garage. Again, no fumes, no exhaust. It can charge there, and it would be plugged in, and it would preheat my car. And I would tell it to do that from my Amazon Alexa. Like, that's the beauty of technology integration. And I know some people are like, oh, I don't want all this technology. I don't want the government spying on me. I hate to break it to you. If you've driven a car that was built after 1995, the government can spy on you. There are computers in there that they can track. There's already tons of computers integrated into even gas-powered vehicles. So an electric car is no different in that way. Like, if you're planning on trying to hide from the government, you need to buy a car at least pre-1995. But otherwise, like, the technology integration, are people spying on me? I don't really care if they are, but that's because I get so many benefits out of it. It's the same thing with your cell phone. The convenience of a cell phone, is there a risk of people spying on us? I suppose, but the convenience of what they can do, to me, it makes up for that. It gets better over time because of this technology integration. My cars get software updates. So for example, again, this is one of these cool things about Tesla, which kind of makes it exciting, is they do a lot of new things. So hopefully you can see this video here. What I want to do is pull up another video for you. We get our we call it our Christmas gift from Santa Elon. Usually pops up right around Christmas Eve every year. It'll be a whole new way. They'll change your car. They'll put a whole bunch of new technologies and things into it. So this is what we got this year on Christmas Eve. Our car can do this now. So again, just another one of those fun things. Like, why do we have that? Well, just because, I guess, we can do that. And that's what, to me, is exciting about the cars. What's that?
이번에 테슬라에서 크리스마스 업데이트가 있었죠. 그중에 추가된 기능 중에 하나가 라이트 쇼라는 기능인데요. 한번 같이 보실게요.
Is that next video running? Sounds
Sorry
like
about that. Hang on just a minute. Oh, let me go back. It looks like something must be running. Again, I'm still trying to get used to back and forth here. Let's pause that. There we go. Okay. So back here, new share, and we'll go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so we'll keep going here. So again, thanks everyone for coming. I know it's a long presentation, but I love answering questions and keeping people up on it. So again, that is all technology that comes and is available over the air that we get updated and sent to us in our little Christmas packages. So that's the beauty of over-the-air updates and the technology integration. The other reason I really like EVs is they've created more of a minimalist design. As you can see here, this is the inside of my car. I'm Scandinavian. We like things simple and modern looking, and that's what this car provides. It gives us that very simple, modern look. So again, it's minimalist, it's simple, it's clean. The lines on the outside of the car are clean. Those are all things that I like as well about it. And in terms of other things, you get things like dog mode, all right, which allows you to leave your dog in the car. It will maintain temperature. It'll keep it warm or cool, set to the temperature that you want. You can remote start the car. You can, if you left your car outside and it's about ready to start raining or hailing on your car and you need to get it in the garage, but you're at work and, oh no, what am I going to do? You can ask your neighbor, call your neighbor and say, hey, can you go out to my car and pull it in the garage? I'm going to remote start it for you. That's an option that you get, an availability that you have. We also have the ability to set climate from anywhere, charge times and rates. We get camp mode where you can sleep in the car and it will maintain temperature for you. You can send navigation of your car when you've looked up something on Google. You can direct that and send that into your navigation system. You have autopilot and self-driving and valet mode where you have a teenage driver. Like when my kids are teenagers, I'm looking forward to this. You can set a max speed that they can drive at. You can see where they are driving. You can see what they're doing with your car. You have Sentry mode, which has cameras all around the car. It keeps track of what's going around outside your car. And if you run into an issue, yeah, dog mode, Cheryl, is amazing. It's great with the dogs on trips. But if you have an issue and somebody comes near your car, maybe your dog's in the car and they're like knocking or making noise, the car will flash and alert at them and like, back up, Sentry mode is activated. It'll flash the horns. If they start getting very aggressive around it, it will start blaring Metallica to the outside speakers and making a whole bunch of noise. It will then send your phone an alert and say, hey, there's somebody at your car. And then you can remote through the app, start yelling at the people to get away from your car. It does this weird voice modulation thing. I mean, it's incredible what you can do with that piece of glass in your pocket and an electric vehicle. And dog mode is great for when we would leave the dogs in the car to run in to get some food or whatever. The other thing for me is the time savings. Okay, a lot of people think, oh, well, you got to sit around and wait for charging all the time. Yes and no. I found that you're not wasting time standing at a gas pump, especially in freezing cold days like now. I used to hate that. I have to gas up every other day with my Ford Fiesta, and standing outside in January for the 10 minutes it took to get out and, you know, slide the card and enter the zip code and, you know, go through all those steps. I was freezing, you know, the gas pumps were smelly, you know, and dirty. It was not nearly as convenient. But now with this whole ABC, always be charging, when I pull in to my garage, I plug in the car, I wake up, I got a full tank of fuel. All right. If I were to go to work and I wanted to charge down in the village on Depot Street, like Steve had mentioned, I can go there, plug in, walk up the hill to work, and within a few hours, I've more than added back my range, you know, and I can walk back down the hill at lunch and get it and unplug it. So that's convenient. But the big thing is that superchargers, especially in fast chargers, it's about 20 minutes to maybe half an hour to charge at most, in most cases. So usually you pull in, and by the time you've gotten, you know, I pull in, unplug. I have 3 kids. We get them out of the car. We go in, get some, you know, go to the bathroom, get some food, come back out. The car's done and ready to go. If we were to eat a longer lunch, you know, it would be done even, you know, before we finished eating. So I've never really been sitting around waiting for a car to finish charging. So again, convenient in that way. And it's kind of like plugging in your cell phone at night. I mean, like, do you remember when you never had to plug in a phone and everyone's like, oh, I'm never gonna have a stupid cell phone. You got to plug that in every night, you know, every night. Like, that used to be a problem. People now just, that's the habit. You come home, you plug in your phone. You're at work, you plug in your phone at work. We just do these things. We have to change a little bit of our habits, but ultimately it's really not that hard to make that change. Again, the other big advantage is affordable, available, renewable, American-made fuel. I cannot stress that enough. We get our electricity from a few thousand power plants. They are not outsourced overseas. We are producing our power at those power plants. Some of them are powered by fossil fuels. Yes, we're going to talk about that. But it's much easier to regulate a few thousand power plants than it is to regulate a couple 100 million vehicles. Again, keep in mind, the carbon footprint of electric vehicles is about 30% better than ICE vehicles, and in some cases, even more if the electricity is produced at cleaner sources. So that 30% number, 30% cleaner for an EV, is if you were getting your power from the dirtiest source, which is a coal-fired power plant. In upstate New York, we don't get very much of our power from coal power. So we're going to talk about that too in a minute. But the electric grid is getting cleaner and more renewable every year as the cost of renewables continues to drop. Electric cars are getting cleaner as well. Electric rates, again, stay steady. They're easy to budget. And electricity can be produced at your own home with solar panels or an investment in a solar farm. And once the initial investment is paid off, which for most people takes about 10 to 15 years, after that, your fuel is free at that point. Tesla has built this solar roof that you can see in the lower right-hand corner. That's an example of what technology is coming here. It's already out. It's being put out. It is still expensive, but it's another way to, add power. My brother powers his car with solar panels on his roof. My parents power their electric car with solar panels that are ground mounted, similar to that solar farm up in the corner there. So those are options as well. Again, lots of different ways to power and, charge your car. This is where I get my power. My car is fueled from here. It's basically a solar farm down in Johnson City. We, own 11 panels down there. We bought those panels before we had electric cars. Those 11 panels were enough to power our house. Now, because of the electric cars, we need to buy more panels, which hopefully we'll be able to do in the future. But we have a meter down there that basically runs in reverse and is credited to our bill. And that's the way that we're able to provide our power. Yeah, I think Steve is right. Currently, there is no coal running power plants in New York State. I'll show you the chart that I found. I think it's from a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's a very low number. So we'll kind of go through that and show you those charts as well. But yeah, renewables growing and much greater option. Things to keep in mind, again, American renewable fuel. People argue, well, we could have, in 2005, the Bush administration, that was their argument, American-made fuel. Let's drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to stabilize global supply of oil and reduce OPEC price gouging. I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers this. I do. That was right, in the middle of when I was in college and paying for my own gas. And I remember it very vividly, the prices spiking. But all the oil in that reserve would equal only about 1 year of US demand in 2005, would be even less today. But untold ecological damage will be caused by that drilling, as it already is in many parts of the world, especially in parts that are poor, war-torn, and powerless. By increasing fuel economy standards for ICE-powered cars to 40 miles per gallon, that would save the amount that could be drilled in the refuge. It would save that amount in 15 years, just by increasing fuel efficiency standards. So think about how much could be saved by switching to an ICE, from ICE-powered cars to an EV run on renewables instead. So again, for me, oil price fluctuations were a big reason for going EV. We see that oil is on a continued upward trend, especially with increased global conflicts, rises of nationalism, geopolitical instability, of course, as well as the increased cost of extracting oil from remote, dangerous, and environmentally sensitive locations, and the decreasing demand due to the efficiencies and also this move to electric vehicles. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, about 47% of petroleum products consumed in the U.S. were used strictly for gasoline for transportation. I mean, that's a huge number. Shell Oil Company, though, estimates the global peak oil demand as soon as 2021. Now, they haven't run those numbers yet. I'm guessing peak oil actually peaked in 2019. And the reason was, with the pandemic last year, we saw a global drop-off in oil demand as everyone was forced to stay home during the pandemic, or many people were forced to stay home. So I think 2019 might have actually been the year. We'll find out when they start releasing numbers here. But current projections show that EV growth may displace up to 2 million barrels of oil a day by 2023. My personal gas savings for the last year, 863 gallons on just one car, not on our second one, on just the one, since we haven't gone a full year of owning two yet. 863 gallons, total projections over 7 years, 175,000 miles of ownership. That's 6,000 gallons of gas, which, if you don't know how big that is, that's one of those tanker trucks. Over the life of my Ford Fiesta, I would need an entire tanker truck to fill that, which is crazy to think about that amount over the life of the vehicle. So oil companies have already started, accounting for this, and now they're trying to market things like plastics to make up for their losses in gasoline sales, which is a whole nother issue. But EVs are truly disruptive, system-changing technology, which means that you would think, oh, well, if there's more EVs, there'll be less people buying gas, so I should keep my gas car. Gas will be cheaper. That's not really what we're seeing. The problem is now, think back to the pandemic last year, gasoline prices dropped off a cliff, production dropped off a cliff to go with it. As a result, once production demand did go back up a little bit, and once people could start moving and traveling again, the prices spiked. And that's what we're dealing with right now. It's really as a result of the pandemic and the fact that production had dropped way off when demand dropped way off. So these fluctuations are only going to continue. And over time, the price of gas, I wouldn't count on it. It may fall for short periods, but it's generally on an upward trend. So here are some of the EV myths that are out there. And these are ones that I've had people, friends, family, people come up to me in parking lots and say these direct quotes at me. So you are just extending the tailpipe when you drive electric because your electricity comes from fossil fuels, you libtard, which I always love hearing being called that term. That was a direct quote from somebody in a parking lot. So fact, mine runs on the sun. Again, we have solar panels. And even if I bought normal electricity from the grid, it does not come anywhere near the same carbon footprint as a regular ICE-powered car. And that also applies to the overall carbon footprint of not only the electricity used to run it, but the carbon used to build the car in the first place. Yes, electric cars are more energy intensive to build, but the difference is made up within usually the first 20 to 30,000 miles of driving that electric car. That difference in manufacturing carbon that it takes to manufacture them is made up in a very short period of time, very early on. The other thing to consider, again, you can see just some facts there. I went through and used the Union of Concerned Scientists model, and basically figured out in my zip code in Binghamton, the carbon emissions from my electric car based on where my electricity comes from is equivalent to a gas-powered car that gets 229 miles per gallon. I don't know about you guys, but even a Toyota Prius doesn't come anywhere close to that number. So in reality, we know that basically a gas-powered vehicle, there's none that are going to be the equivalent of even the lifetime use of an electric. Here's the other things. We got to look at the top emitters of carbon by sector. There's industrial, commercial buildings, electric power generation, and residential buildings, as well as transportation. Now, industrial, commercial buildings, and electric power generation, other than with our vote, we don't really have a lot of power over those. We can vote, we can petition, we can protest, we can try to fight for lowering those emissions, but really in terms of our personal impact, it's relatively low on what we can impact there. However, 46% of New York State's top emitters is transportation, and that is something that we can change at an individual level. We can also change the other one, which is residential buildings. Again, that's a whole nother conversation about electrifying and heat pumps and so on. And some people will say, oh, well, if you're using more electricity for your transportation, now your electric power is going to need to be increased. That's true, but a lot of that increase is now, because of political will in New York State, it is being generated by renewable means. And we're pretty fortunate that the energy mix and generation, like Steve mentioned, there really aren't very many coal-fired power plants left at all. These are older numbers from 2018. And it's less than 3% for coal, oil, or hydro pump storage. And hydro pump storage is a little bit of an interesting topic, but as you can see, we get a large chunk of it from hydropower, from nuclear, which I do think there's a place for in our electric grid. But you can see generally we have a pretty clean grid, and every day it gets cleaner, which means my electric powered vehicles are getting cleaner every day. If you own a gas powered vehicle, it's from the day you bought it till the day you sell it or get rid of it or it's destroyed, it probably is only getting more polluting as systems break down and efficiencies are lost as well. Good question, Cheryl. Are you also vegan? My wife is full vegan. I'm vegetarian. Vegetarian vegans are, yeah, it is better for the environment. What kind of proteins do I use most often? Soy is our most common, but we also eat a lot of beans and so on. And I find that beans are one of the easiest ways to add that protein back for sure. So definitely, yeah, good question. And again, I'll come back there. I love answering questions. I know it's taking a little longer. Hey, I appreciate all you guys hanging in there with me. So again, electricity generation is getting better. The other thing is I get this myth, I've had friends, conservative friends tell me this, your stupid car batteries will end up in a landfill polluting groundwater someday, give up snowflake, you're causing more environmental damage by driving that dumb car. The point I always make is if you believe that, after they've harvested and spent energy harvesting the materials, the raw materials to make the battery at great expense and also at a heavy environmental cost, that they're just going to dump them back in the ground, I got a bridge to sell you, because that's not what's going to happen. Already, Tesla Giga Nevada, which is the main battery factory right now for Tesla in the United States, they're using recycled batteries material. So the batteries that originated from that factory, all right, have been used in, from car accidents and things like that. We have waste batteries already from car accidents and battery failure or whatever. There's a company now that's founded by J.B. Straubel, who is one of the original founders of Tesla. He has now started this Redwood recycling company that built right near the factory. They now take those batteries, break them down into those battery components, and then process them and sell them right back to the Tesla factory just down the street. So this battery recycling is already occurring, and it is getting better and better with time. And it will
Hey, Eric.
get better. Yeah.
Just to jump in, I was recently in a conference. I won't get the number exactly right, but they addressed this issue too. And one of the things they said, which I thought was really interesting, like existing cars, like ICE cars, have batteries as well. And before electric cars, they were already at something like 98% recycle rate for batteries. So to think that there would be a difference with electric batteries is, sort of the silly point. Like obviously they're going to be recycled as much, if not more, than the batteries we already have, which is at a phenomenal rate. So it's not a big issue. as you mentioned.
Yeah, excellent point, Mike. Yeah, it's one of these things where there is this misconception again, and a lot of it is spread on purpose through certain media channels about electric cars, and we're going to get to more of that as we continue. But yes, like major parts of cars already are recycled. One of the richest people in the city of Binghamton is the guy who owns a scrap metal dealership where they basically dismantle cars into their components and then sell the scrap metal, right? Like they're making absurd amounts of money off of recycling components. And again, batteries in electric cars will be no different, just like the 12-volt battery in your car already is being recycled too. So I think this is something that's only going to get better with time. And that also kind of takes away the argument of, oh, well, you have to mine for the batteries. I've had people who told me that, I've been called a moron and you don't think about this, but oh, they're mining the batteries, components. And yes, they are. They absolutely are. Is there environmental destruction with that? Absolutely. Is it bad? Yes. I'm now hoping that, eventually we may be able to mine these from asteroids. That's what I keep putting into my kids' heads. Like, go to Cornell, become an astrophysicist and learn how to mine, be the first to build a company that mines asteroids for these rare earth metals. But it's one of these things that we're seeing with time. We're going to get better at recycling. We're going to get better at using these materials because they are so valuable, for sure. And definitely, great point there, Michael. So let's talk about the charging itself. I know there's a lot of questions about that. Basically, I always subscribe to the always be charging philosophy, which means if you can charge, do it. If you can charge for free, definitely do it. And generally, you'll always have, you don't have range anxiety if you are in that situation. We have three different levels of charging. There's level one, which is that household outlet right in the middle. A lot of people are like, oh, where am I going to charge this car? If you were to get stranded, and I think about this, if for some reason I were to get stranded on County Road 14, which there is not a lot out there until you get to Treadwell, I have fueling stations at every house that has a household plug. I can plug in my car to any household outlet. It is a very slow charge. It only has about 4 miles of range per hour of charging. It is not an effective method of charging, but I could do that. The more common method is the level 2, which is what you can see here, this J1772 port. That's what most people charge on a regular basis. And then there are over on the right, which is level 3 charging. And that is your DC fast chargers that with, the electric cars now, these things charge your car, from 10 to 80% in like 20 minutes in many cases, depending on how fast your car can charge. Again, this kind of breaks it down for you. Generally, a level 2 charge is all you need if you have like 4 or 5, like if you run your battery way down, as long as you can get to a level 2, within 4 or 5 hours, the car would be charged up. This is what people install in their garages, and we'll show you my setup in a minute. The DC fast chargers are what we need more of to enable highway and trips and traveling that's much more efficient and easy for people. Those charge at extremely fast rates, all right? This is the level 1 setup that came with my Chevy Bolt. Every electric car will come with a level 1 setup. Again, this can be plugged into any old household outlet. This is my level 2 charger. It's a $750 Clipper Creek unit. I picked this unit off of Amazon because Clipper Creek is an American company out of California. When you call their service, you're speaking to an American who knows what your problem is, who is at the factory, and who is able to solve the problem for you. And these things are built like tanks. They've been around for a very long time. They're a proven company. They're very durable. They make chargers, or these aren't really chargers, they're connectors. Your chargers in the car. But they make these connectors, these Clipper Creek connectors, you can see in that picture there on the left, to be put outside. They're very durable units. $750, come with a multi-year warranty, really great company. If you're looking for one, that would be my recommendation for a unit that can charge any electric car. I have mine plugged into a NEMA 1450 outlet. It's on 240 volt circuit, 32 amp dryer outlet, basically, is what it is. And I have it in my garage. You can see in my garage here, the guy that used to own the house before me was a woodworker, so he also has another 30 amp 240 volt right there. But I had a new NEMA 1450 put in down here, and that's what that's plugged into. It cost about $200 because my panel is right here, so they only had to run the one wire to it. That was what I started with. The other thing we did, Steve had mentioned, the Delaware County Electric Co-op does have a charger. Now, this is at the old location, all right? It's now moved down the street to Depot Street in the village. It's the same unit. It's 2 chargers. They are free. This is a level 2. This means you add about 25 to 30 miles of range per hour of charging. It is a convenient location to the village, to campus. It's a great spot. In Oneonta, if you're near Oneonta, SUNY Oneonta has chargers. I know after talking with the president, we should hopefully have chargers installed on our campus at Farnsworth and also at North Hall as part of their renovation projects. We should be getting those installed, so maybe able to charge right in the parking lots on campus as well. But this is an option too. I used to go down here and park and charge because it was cheap, it was free, and I would do it to save money. And I liked my little walk up the street to my, I was at the very top of the hill. I'm at the very top in Clark, so it was a little bit of a walk, but I used to use that.
Did you ever have trouble? I mean, were they full? Are there a lot of people using these? I mean,
Yeah, good question, Cheryl. So there was one time I went there and both spots were filled.
oh, just once. Okay.
Once in the time that I've used it, in the 2 years I've used it, it only happened once. Most of the time it's no one or maybe only one other car.
Okay.
I, again, didn't need the charge. Even with my Chevy Bolt, like Jess said, the range and heat in the wintertime, it does take a hit. I could always make it to work and back home, but I liked the extra buffer. I always subscribe to the always be charging philosophy. So that's why I would use it. But after I started, again, they're becoming more popular. After seeing other, that filled up that one time, I was like, it's probably not right for me to hog the one charger, there's two chargers, but it's probably not right for me to hog one of those spots when I don't really need to. And we're in a location where, other than there's one in Walton, there's another one in Andes, but like, I don't want to be taking up a spot in the village when I really don't need to. And I'm only doing it to save money. That and my coworkers like Mike Brannigan and Doug McKee and Barry Person was relentless with me, making fun of the fact that I would park my electric car and walk up the hill just to save a few pennies on electricity. So yeah, but for the most part, I also stopped doing it just more because I don't want to take up a spot when I really don't need to. But it is there. It is an option. So the other things to think about here in terms of charging, there are these level 3 fast chargers, and many of them have been installed around New York State. We have a lot. We have one that just opened this week, actually, in Binghamton in the city. We have one down in Conklin. We have another one at the Morabito up in Castle Creek. They're starting to spread all over. They're basically what are known as Electrify America is the company, but they're branded by New York State specifically. New York State right now, most of these are free. You don't have to pay to use these DC fast chargers. Again, if you go on PlugShare, you'd be able to find them. They're on a lot of throughway stops, on major highway stops, and a lot of the time, because they're trying to encourage EV usage, they are free. And they are New York State branded ones. But yeah, basically, I stopped at this one. This one is actually south on 81, right near the PA border. We stopped to use it just to try it out. In the 35,000 miles of driving my Bolt, this is the one time I did a DC fast charge. Most of my mileage was charged up in my garage or at the Delaware Co-op. So you really, you don't need to use them as much as you think unless you're traveling quite a bit. And again, New York State is getting to that point, and many other states where these options are available. As with many things with electric cars, Tesla does this better. They're very fast. The cars are designed to charge at a much faster rate. Right now, only Teslas can use them. However, that is changing. They are making and selling adapters, and soon anyone with an electric car will be able to buy an adapter and charge their electric car from these chargers. They can add up to 1,000 miles per hour of charging, which basically, eventually the curve slows down. So generally, to go from 10% state of battery charge to 80% takes about 20 minutes. The computer system is very in the car's plans and tells you which chargers to stop at, for how long, for the most efficient route. The car does it for you. You don't need to look at an app. You don't need to think about it. You get in the car, you enter where you're going or your address that you're heading to. It will drive you there and then tell you how long to charge for. So very efficient. The other cool thing, oh yeah, question?
Does speed, like with gas powered car, does that affect the length of your charge? Does that make sense? Does speed decrease the amount of charge you have? Like with, what I mean? I'm
Oh.
not saying that very well.
All right, so do you mean, Cheryl, like as you, the more you add, the more battery, or the more you're filling up the battery, does it slow down? Is that kind of what you're asking?
So like if I speed, my gas goes quicker. So if I speed in an electric vehicle, does that decrease the charge?
Yeah, so and the reason speed kills speed kills in terms of people driving off the road, but yes, the faster you drive, yes, you are using more energy.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so yeah, just like in your car, if you drive at like we drove south this summer, driving at 85 miles an hour, you're definitely using more electricity at a faster rate than you would if you were driving at 55 miles per hour. And it's actually like it very quickly, the faster you go over, I think with Teslas, the sweet spot is about 65, 70. Anything over 70, it starts decreasing more. And it had a noticeable rate where you would see like, oh, instead of having 250 miles of range between a charge, now I may only have 225 because I'm driving at 80 miles an hour as opposed to 70. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make
Yep.
sense?
That makes complete sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And again, it is the same, like you've said, Cheryl, it is the same as with your gas powered car. My Ford Fiesta could do 95 miles an hour driving to work, but I would definitely burn through more gas. And it's just the nature of physics, right? The misconception people have, though, is that you need to charge the car to 100%. That's not true. It takes longer to go from 80% to 100% because the car slows down the charge to try to protect the battery pack. It's not necessary to go to 100%. It's not as good for the battery to do that on a regular basis either. You can, but not really needed. I almost never charge to 100%. Even in the winter time, I just don't need to. There are charging options usually where I am, or my range is sufficient enough, 250 miles is sufficient enough for me to get where I'm going to get to the next charger, and I don't need to charge it all the way up to 100%. So that's really important to understand. The other thing to keep in mind, this is actually old data. Tesla had 15,000 units. That was 2 years ago. They're now at over 30,000 units worldwide, and they're growing at still, now it's about 10 new stations per day are being added. These are the new stations they're building. It's kind of cool. These solar canopies are directly powering the chargers. They even have these little lounge areas now. So when you pull in to charge, you can go in. I think this is going to be the future of gas stations. If you know anybody who owns local Maravitos or any of the local gas stations, I've seen their Maravitos are smart. They're already starting to put in electric car chargers, like in Oneonta. If you've been in Oneonta there recently, you've seen they have Tesla's chargers and they also have Electrify America there. It's a very smart move because you have a captive audience. Gas stations don't make their money off of selling gas. They make only like 1 or 2 cents per gallon. Where they make money is those drivers hopefully coming in, using their bathrooms, and then buying something like a Gatorade or a candy bar. This is a captive audience. When you pull in at these superchargers, you need to sit for 20 minutes. In a gas station, I'm going to pull in and it's going to take me 10 minutes to add gas, even in a smaller car. My truck that we used to own, it was 15 minutes standing there filling that thing up. And it was a real kick in the crotch to see the price on the gas pump afterwards. These are nice in that you just pull in, you plug in, it charges your credit card through your account. You walk into this lounge area, get your drink, go to the bathroom, car is charged from the sun, and at a very, very fast rate. Yeah, and again, Cheryl, your brother probably is experiencing it. Does the cold weather affect the batteries? It absolutely does. So cold weather does affect the batteries. The beauty of it is the cars have accounted for this, and they use some of their energy to warm the batteries and keep them warm. It doesn't damage the batteries to being cold. Interesting stat, the number one selling vehicle in Norway has been electric cars. They have now, I think they're at 65% market is EVs in Norway. So they can handle the cold. Do you lose range? Yes, because the battery will be heating itself. Again, with Teslas and the new heat pumps, and many new EVs are moving to heat pumps, they're not losing as much range. But yes, just like a regular battery in your phone, it is affected by the cold. You will have less range as a result of that. And we're going to cover that here in a minute. This is from 2 years ago. I couldn't find the updated map, mostly because all those things that are gray, those little dots, those are supercharger stations that were going in or were to be built. They are already built. The new maps, they don't even bother making these anymore because the whole country is covered with these. These are all supercharger locations. Again, in the cars, in the Teslas, they basically route you to the nearest supercharger for how long you need to be there. They even, again, like, Cheryl just mentioned, well, what about with the batteries in the winter? Well, the cars will warm themselves before they get to the supercharger. They will warm the batteries. They'll expend a little energy to do that, but that means your supercharger session will go faster. It's better for the battery health. So they've thought of these things, and we got that ability to precondition the battery while driving to the supercharger through an over-the-air software update. Again, it's the technology is kind of great that way. So this is an area I wanted to address, and I know it's kind of hard to see. I'm going to move this down here so we can actually see this. This is something I just got a comment on the alumni Facebook page, and it's one of these people who I'm sure was trying to be a little snarky about, oh, well, what are you going to do? What happened with, I-95 in Virginia? All those electric cars basically on the side of the road without a charge after 24 hours. That was a myth. All right. This is actually, there was a rumor going around that, oh, all these electric cars died on the highway during that 24-hour, issue that just happened, was it 2 or 3 days ago now, in Virginia. In reality, this is a USA Today fact check of that. It was proven entirely false. It wasn't electric cars that were causing traffic jams. But this is a meme that I've had multiple conservative friends of mine send me. Imagine you're stuck in this mess. It's getting dark. The storm's getting worse. The line's barely moving. Would you rather be stuck in a reliable gas-powered car or a battery-powered one? This was a meme that was blasted all around social media. And this is probably what that person's referring to, that I now have to go on the alumni Facebook page and answer that question. But you can see Alberta Proud, interestingly enough, if you look up that organization, it is a Canadian organization that's basically a front organization designed to promote oil and gas. So this is something they put out there, though. People forward it on without really thinking. The cool thing about electric cars is, and again, this is the point, I've had people ask me about this, the quote was, "You stupid snowflake, your dumb electric car will die in a traffic jam in winter, and then what will you do?" And yes, that was an online quote that I got from a friend. And you can say their grammar isn't always great. But this is the stuff that's out there. The thing to keep in mind is, with the large batteries, EVs can run heating and air conditioning for long periods of time due to the extremely efficient systems, and are actually less likely to run out of fuel than an ICE-powered vehicle. The thing to keep in mind is, most of the power that's necessary from that huge battery is meant to drive the wheels. If you're parked, running the heater systems does not consume nearly as much power as if you were driving it. That's proven. Again, Jess mentioned her car. Yes, the older cars with the resistive heaters, they do use more electricity, but even that is going to last a while. I had people that in Tesla groups I was in, they went in and did calculations that with like a 60% battery charge, they ran calculations on watts used per hour at 20 degrees temperature. How long would it last for? At 60% battery, my car, I should be able to run for 36 hours, run the heat and air conditioning, and still have, after 36 hours, about 20% battery left, enough to get me off the highway and get me to a charger. This whole myth, this whole idea that, oh, their electric cars are going to freeze. A, they don't freeze. They're going to keep you more comfortable without breathing in fumes the entire time. And I could sit in my comfort of my car with the heat on, plus heated seats, and watch Netflix or play video games or whatever. Like, electric cars do a lot better in this scenario. The other cool thing, again, kind of continuing with this theme, is those large batteries aren't just used for powering and heating during traffic emergencies like that. They can also be used to power your home. This is a Ford Lightning. This is the new electric F-150 that's coming out from Ford Motor Company. It's being introduced this spring. They're building this at the Rouge factory in Detroit, Michigan, which if you're ever out that direction, highly recommend getting a factory tour of the Rouge. It's fascinating. Really cool to see. Their new factory built onto the Rouge is building this electric truck. And this truck can power your home for 3 days. Has 240-volt outlets. It has multiple 120-volt outlets. This is a boon for people who work in construction as well. You no longer need to carry a portable generator. Now your truck is going to be a generator. So again, amazing stuff that's coming from these cars. Steve, I'll definitely send you, I'm going to find, I know Michael said we're going to go through and be able to hopefully post this on a YouTube channel. We'll get this link out to people. Send me an email, anybody that wants these slides. But again, yeah, so power your house for 3 days. Interestingly, during the big Texas freeze last year, they had cars, they had people who had hybrid F-150s, which already have the ability to run off of a large battery pack in the hybrid truck. They were powering their house for days while their neighbors were in the cold from their truck, right? So now the all-electric truck will also be able to do that. You'll be able to run your house for 3 days, all right? And then it shuts off when you have about 20% battery left. Then guess what you do? You're like, oh, I still don't have power. Well, now drive to a gas station or drive to a station where there's a charger in another town that has power up there, bring your big battery back, and now you got another 3 days of power. A lot of people bring that up to me like, oh, well, what happens when your power's out at night? Okay, well, what do you do when the gas station, when you don't have power with your gas car? You drive the car and you go to a gas station. And if there is power and it's a widespread power outage, guess what? Gas stations, you're not gonna be able to get gas either. They need electricity to pump. So again, it's not really a concern as much as people make it out to be. And I think it's actually a solution. These F-150s with bidirectional charging are a phenomenal option, and it's something I think we're going to see more of. They're large grid storage, so they're going to be a great way to power your house through a power outage, which we know with storms the way they are nowadays. I thought about buying one of these just purely for this feature, just so I have the ability to power my home and keep us warm. So really phenomenal. And then, even if you were on that winter road, and the only advantage gas-powered cars have in that situation is if you were there for 36, 48 hours, you ran the battery dead, and by the way, every gas-powered vehicle would probably also be dead. The advantage of having a gas is you can just splash in a low gasoline from AAA and you're good to go. We did mention already, AAA is coming up with portable chargers to charge electric cars in that situation, but other companies have started thinking about this. Again, this is that electric F-150, that Lightning. They have a 240 volt in the bed, which means, and this is what they're demonstrating, you can charge other electric vehicles from that very large battery in this truck and power an electric car from an electric car, charge it for 15 minutes, and then drive it to the nearest charger to get the rest. The other option is, if you look on the right picture, that is a Rivian R1T electric truck, which they are testing. They've developed basically tow charging. It puts the truck into a neutral gear, basically. It uses the regenerative braking to recharge the battery. So you have that trucker in front of you and you say, hey, can you go through and power me up and tow me, and they'll tow you for 15 minutes. You got to charge now for, driving another 30 miles or so. So there are things and solutions that are coming and that have already been developed. So I know I'm running long. You guys got to duck out, feel free, but we'll keep going here. I'll get through all this. And I do appreciate all the questions and time. So in terms of our summer travel, a lot of people say, oh, I can't travel in an electric car. Well, Tesla is definitely the easiest way to do it right now. This last summer, we took our Model Y 2,000 miles round trip to Jekyll Island in Georgia. Highly recommend going there. We only arrived, we had my family that was in a gas-powered vehicle ahead of us. We left from Binghamton, New York. We drove to Washington, D.C. to stay with my brother. We showed up 20 minutes after our family in the gas-powered vehicle, and that was because we had to make an extra bathroom break for my kids. If we didn't have to do that, we would have arrived at the same time. From DC to Georgia, all the way down to Jekyll Island that day of driving, we made that stretch of the trip and arrived only 1 hour behind our family in the gas-powered vehicle. We left at the same time. We arrived only an hour behind. So, a lot of people don't think about that. They say, oh, I need a car that can go 500 miles. So I drive 500 miles straight. It's like, okay, so you drive 500 miles without getting gas or stopping to pee. Well, that's usually been when people start stammering at me. And I say, no, you don't. You have to stop. We have to go to the bathroom. I like to say that my EVs line up very well with the range of them is equivalent to my kids' bladder. Okay, By 150 to 200 miles of driving, my kids need a bathroom break. And I do too, especially after my morning coffee. So it works out perfect that after a couple hundred miles, we would stop and charge. All right. And that's why, you know, really, we only came in an hour behind after a whole day of driving from DC to Georgia. We came in only an hour behind the gas powered vehicle. Once we were on the island, free charging was available all over, which you can see in the lower right picture. This island's kind of set up as a golf resort too. So they are used to charging electric golf carts, and they're like, you know what, let's just add in car chargers at the same time. So every public beach and public attraction and private attractions and shopping centers on the island had free level 2 charging. So we would drive around and like, oh, let's plug in and charge. We don't need it, but it's free. Why not? And that's what we would do. The other cool thing was those 20-minute stops helped break up the trip. I felt a lot less tired after driving all day than I would in my gas-powered vehicle. I made more stops, but they weren't that much longer. And the other thing was, it was a great time to get out, stretch our legs. And the cool thing was, is this Tesla community. I couldn't find a picture of it, but we have pictures of our kids playing with other kids at the superchargers. There was one family that we were kind of charger hopping with, 150 to 200 miles at a time. We would meet them at the next charger heading south on 95. And their kids were about our kids' age. They had a little cornhole game. And for the 20 minutes while our cars charged, we would play cornhole with them. Like, it's great. And the fathers and I would talk, electric cars, and, kids would play cornhole. It was just a great experience. We also found that, again, this little, it's not little, I mean, it's pretty good size, 3-row SUV, seats 7, plenty of storage for our family of 5 going to the beach with 3 rows of seats. The other thing is, in that time that we've driven this car, we put over 20,000 miles on it, driving on trips. When we do stop, or when we have time to kill, you have Netflix and Disney Plus. We have video games. You can see this was one of the gifts we got from Santa Elon over Christmas. My wife and my son are playing Sonic the Hedgehog, which for any of you 90s kids, that was a fun little game that was uploaded, for free to our car as part of our software update at Christmas time. So, that's what our kids would do. If we had already done bathroom breaks and everything else, and we're still waiting 5 minutes, we'll throw on a video game to play. There's lots of entertainment within the car itself. The car is able to tow as well. Our car has a tow rating of 3,500 pounds. People tow these large campers. Now, the thing with that is right now you're decreasing your range by about 40% when you tow a very large boxy vehicle like that trailer there. In that YouTube clip, the guy was only able to average about 100 to 120, 150 miles of range in between supercharger stops. He charged 80%, only be able to drive about 120, maybe 150 miles if he was lucky, before he'd have to stop again because he's towing a gigantic brick behind him. When we tow this jet ski, our range is not affected as much because it's a much more aerodynamic thing that we're towing. I found that when we used to own our pickup, all the things I would do with that, haul with it, that type of thing, I should be able to do the same things with a utility trailer. I don't think Americans, a lot of us think we need to always have a huge pickup truck, whereas in reality, most of us can probably get by with a crossover and a utility trailer. And that's the route that we're finding works pretty well for us if we do need to haul anything big. The car can tow 3,500 pounds. It's also really great for camping. We can throw kayaks on the roof, even though the roof is all glass. They make a roof rack for that. And a lot of the campgrounds, like you can see my wife and I, my wife there in the lower left picture, that is at Geneva State Park. A lot of the state park campgrounds have free charging. So we were getting a free charge there while we, hiked around the park. This is where we camped at night, was at another park on Seneca Lake. We parked at an RV spot. You can hook up to the RV spot and charge the car from the RV. So we could have done that. We didn't. We ended up just rolling out this air mattress, or not an air mattress, it's actually a memory foam mattress. And we slept in the car. We watched Netflix and we put it in what's called camp mode. It was about 80 degrees when we were there. So it's middle of summer, which go back to that 80 degrees now. But this kept it at a relatively constant, steady temperature. And we lost, over the course of 10 hours of running the car that night, we lost maybe 10%. It was about 1% per hour to keep the car at a cool 65 degrees while we slept. So again, we could have plugged in and not lost any range, but I wanted to see what it would do. So yeah, basically 1% per hour. is what you end up losing. So not bad at all. And again, great option in camp mode. That's another setting in there. There's plenty of room for everyone. Again, this is our 7-seater. That rear seat in the rear, if you're taller than 5'6", 5'7", I probably wouldn't advise sitting back there. It wouldn't be very comfortable. I'm 5'10". I can get back in there, and I've tried it. It'd be fine for short trips, but not comfortable for long term. So it is great though for us with young kids. It works phenomenally well. And when we aren't using that seat, like all the seats, they fold flat and you don't really lose any cargo space. So kind of nice that way. In terms of the charging costs, I know we've had a couple questions about that already, but it really does vary on your location. Most of us in New York State, we're paying around 10 cents to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. That's most of us. I have a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack in this car. So completely empty to a completely full pack would cost $7.50. My daily commute though is about 150 miles. And in the fall, spring, I'm using about 32 kilowatt hours to do that. So it's about $3.20. Or if I wanted to be really cheap and stop at Depot Street, it would be $1.60 for me to do my daily commute. In the winter, again, because the battery needs to heat itself, because it's less efficient and I'm using heat, I pay about $4 to do my commute in the depths of winter. $2 if I were to charge for free at the co-op. So again, it is a very affordable option when you consider that even my Ford Fiesta, which that would get 40 miles to the gallon. When gas was cheap, for me to do the daily commute, I was paying at least $12, and that was when gas was cheap. Now, yeah, I'd probably be paying $15, $16, per day to drive that very, very small, very fuel efficient gas powered car. So you can see the significant difference. And this is a stable cost over the life of the vehicle. Electricity rates don't change that much. So again, kind of talking about that winter myth, a lot of people are like, oh, they're, the top you may not be able to see is basically only drives to school and work, worried that 250 miles of range isn't enough. The range on these cars is usually plenty for what most people are going to need. It is affected to an extent by winter weather, but not as much as people hear or think about. It'll be fine. It loses some efficiencies, but they are getting better at managing those. And again, with my new longer range cars, if you have a car that has 300 miles of range, and you're driving less than 150 miles or less than, probably if you have a 300 mile range car and you're driving under 200 miles a day and you don't have any other charging options, you're only charging your garage, doing a 200-mile commute, you're still going to be okay. All right. That's the important thing to remember. Again, in the summertime, my typical range in the Bolt was 250 miles. It's about 300 miles on the Tesla at highway speed. My worst winter range I ever saw on the Bolt was about 180. In the Tesla on the coldest day down, I probably would see 250 miles of range. Again, the heat pump makes up that difference. Usually an ICE powered car loses range as well in the winter, about 10%, but because the car is only 30% efficient to begin with, you don't really notice it as much. However, if you are noticing a dip in your ICE powered car, one of the biggest things people forget is to pump up their tires. Your tires lose pressure as the air gets colder. So make sure you're keeping your tires pumped up, and that might solve some of your increased gas usage. Just a little tip for you. I keep that in mind with my EVs as well. So again, if you're using a resistive heater electric car, like what Jess was saying with her earlier Tesla or with my Chevy Bolt, you can expect to see a 30% to maybe 40% decrease in range. With the newer Teslas with the heat pumps, maybe 20%. If that, it's a huge improvement. But you can kind of mitigate that if you're really worried about it by utilizing heat and steering wheels, heated seats and heated steering wheels, which most electric cars come with. It's much more efficient to heat with conduction as opposed to heating the entire car. So with my Chevy Bolt, I would turn on the seat heaters, turn on the heated steering wheel. I kept my winter coat on, and I would be able to make that 150 miles fine with a decent enough cushion. I bought the Model 3 more for the all-wheel drive and having that comfort, knowing I always have all-wheel drive than anything else. But it can be minimized. The other thing is, if you're driving just locally in town, you drive a few miles, get out of the car, run an errand, come back, get back in, drive again. And like you're just doing that short little trips, that uses actually more energy in the wintertime because you're expending all that energy to heat the cabin up driving a short distance, getting out, cabin cools down. If you're driving a long distance to work like I am, you're actually being more efficient with the heat usage because you're heating the cabin up, it's staying at that temperature, and then it's easier to maintain it as you drive that long distance, get out, stop once, you're at work for 8 or 10 hours, then you drive home, you're heating it up again, maintaining that heat till you get home. So it's actually more efficient to heat in the wintertime over a longer distance as opposed to shorter trips. This is another topic I'm going to touch on briefly is battery degradation. This is just some data from very early Model S and X's. People, you can see 100%, all right, what the original 100% rated range was, and over the number of cycles, you can see the trend lines are down near about 95% after like 300 or 400 cycles, which that's when you're basically running the car from empty to full. That would be a full cycle of the battery. That 400 miles is probably equivalent to about 75 to 80,000 miles of driving. So you can see even after 80,000 miles of driving, most of these cars are still hovering around 95% of their original rated range. It can be minimized even more if you don't supercharge as often, if you limit your charge limits to 90% or less, and then make sure you're charging by the time you get down to 10%. And that's kind of the same way with gas cars. Like if you own a gas powered car, when I did, I would always fill up when I got to a quarter tank, because below a quarter tank, you got, dirt and grit and things that build up in the fuels that settle to the bottom of the tank. You really don't want to run it below a quarter tank because that stuff starts getting sucked into your fuel lines. Same logic with an EV. I'm not worried about sucking in bad electrons. What I'm worried about is I don't want to, push the battery that far down to that low state of charge. It's just not as good for the equipment. So I don't let it usually go below 10% before I charge it back up. Also, as Jess mentioned with her car, if you utilize preconditioning, warm it up for 20 minutes before you leave, maybe half an hour on cold days, it will use, for a few pennies, it will pull the power to warm up your car initially, warm up your battery from your wall outlet. It's only a few cents to do that worth of electricity, and you leave. Your range is greatly improved. You get into a warm car. It's just a very convenient way of doing it. And again, it can even set it up to do it off your Amazon Alexa if you want. The way and the reason we're able to do this and minimize battery degradation is because of new battery coolant systems within cars. They are liquid cooled. That makes the batteries last longer. Tesla is working on a 1,000,000-mile battery pack. They already have a 1,000,000-mile electric motor. The motors are designed to go for 1,000,000 miles. So the things I always tell people is that, there are examples of Teslas with 400 and 500,000 miles already on the car and still on the original powertrain and battery. And they've held up very well. Most likely in New York State, your car will rot away before the battery has gotten to a point where you can no longer use it. You may be down to, 85 or 80% of your original mileage of what you used to get, but I don't think too many of us push our cars to 500,000 miles. So that's probably not going to be a concern for most people, for the average person. So why have these cars been slow to catch on? Well, there's a few reasons for it. The cost to produce batteries has been expensive. The magic number they say is about $100 per kilowatt hour production cost. If they can get it to that point, it'll be cheaper than gas powered vehicles. We are getting there. Tesla, the rumor is already there, but the problem is because of part shortages and COVID, it's harder to get chips. It's harder to get other parts that we need. That has made the cost a little bit more significant. And we're not quite at that $100 yet. We should be pretty soon though. Most projections are 2023. It'll be cheaper to produce the electric car than it will be to produce the traditional gas powered vehicle. The other reason we haven't seen as much of this is we're seeing more advertising by auto companies. I was shocked last year when GM released the ad during the Super Bowl of the all electric Hummer EV. That was the first time really where I'm like, wow, this is now catching on. They paid millions of dollars to show this ad during the Super Bowl. Like they are starting to advertise. We're seeing this more. Tesla doesn't have a marketing department because they don't need one. They have orders for months. Like they're producing over 1 million cars a year and they're not able to keep up with what their production is already. They're trying to ramp up production to keep up. So there hasn't been as much advertising. It is picking up though. There is also generally this misinformation campaign by fossil fuel companies. Again, a lot of these memes you see passed around on social media about like, getting stranded and things like that. Those are deliberately being put out there as false information to try to dissuade people from making the switch. There's also this, logic that, you have to be rich to buy one of these cars. Again, 2 teacher salaries, and we own one. It's not, they are not cheap. I'm not saying they are, but again, if you look at the overall cost of the vehicle, it is a cheaper way to go than a similar sized gas powered vehicle. We are already there, and with time and with efficiencies in production, that will get even more so. Where owning a gas powered vehicle will be the way more expensive option than just owning an electric. It's kind of like at that point where I think with electric vehicles, we're sort of at the point where, like in the early 1900s, where horses and the Model T, like horses used to be the cheaper way to go. They were much cheaper than owning a gas powered vehicle. And then Henry Ford created efficiencies within the production lines and was able to produce and mass produce, the Tin Lizzies at a very affordable rate. And those then became the cheaper option. And what ended up happening? Did horses die off and go extinct? No. But now people ride horses for fun, and they're very expensive to maintain. And they're not as effective or efficient a transportation method as my electric, as a gas powered vehicle was. But people still have them. I kind of think of gas powered vehicles in the same way. There's a lot of great, Jay Leno, who's a comedian and lover of many cars, has the logic that, well, his gas powered vehicles that he owns many, those will become his weekend fun vehicles. They're very expensive. They'll be expensive to run. They're not great for the planet, but I'm still going to keep them because I love the cars. And as a kid of Detroit, I totally understand that. But he kind of makes the point that for everyday driving, electric car is going to be the way to go, just in terms of all the reasons we've already talked about. So it was horse and then Model T. Now we're kind of at the point where gas powered vehicles and electrics, the line is shifting where that electric vehicle is really going to be the cheaper way to go. Because of that, there are a lot of threatened business models, including from some of the largest lobbyists that we have in the world and some of the most profitable companies that we have in the world, the fossil fuel companies. So because of that, again, their disinformation campaigns are huge. The other issues that are out there, lack of charging infrastructure, that is improving daily. You go on that PlugShare app, you'll see, I'm amazed how fast they're being added. Charging is being added as part of the infrastructure bill that did pass, not the Build Back Better that's been put on the back burner, but the infrastructure bill that was 1.2 trillion, 1.3 trillion, that was used for a lot of infrastructure, including electric vehicle chargers. That we will start seeing even more, where these fast charging options are going to become available. People that live in the city, destination charging is going to become more available. It's out there now, and it will continue to get better. So even if you don't have a garage of your own to charge in, there will be options available soon. So you've heard this. I've talked for a long time. I apologize again for all my blabbering, but what can you do? This is kind of where we're at. Well, first, consider an EV. If it was me, I would say I would get the Tesla. That's my recommendation. Tesla sold almost 1 million cars last year in 2021. This year, they're opening a new factory in Austin and another one in Germany, in Berlin. With those two combined, they expect to be selling close to 2 million vehicles per year. Tesla has gotten the production of EVs down. They've gotten the technology down. These cars, yes, are very expensive at the start. However, I think they are there. They're fully committed because their whole model is based around electric cars. They don't have a gas-powered option to fall back on. They have been all in the whole way, the whole time. And when you look at the technology and you look at experts that have done teardowns, Tesla's tech is way far advanced above and beyond anyone else. As a result of that, I really feel that that is the best option in terms of resale value and in terms of support in the future. Your best bet would be a Tesla. However, there are many, many options available, more coming every year, every week even. We're seeing companies adding EVs, and we're going to show you some of those in a little bit here. But buy an EV, drive it, show it off, answer questions. I spent a lot of time at chargers. I spent a lot of time at parking lots answering questions, which I'm happy to do. I love doing it. I love doing these types of presentations. Answer people's questions. There are a lot of questions. There's a lot of misinformation, and we need to help correct it. The other thing, promote EV chargers in your communities. I've been trying to promote it on campus. The Green Team's been working on that. This is a great idea for a solar canopy over parking spots. That would be a great way to keep snow off our cars and provide electricity to charge them when we're at work. So it's something that we've gone through and hopefully will add as well. Advocate for renewable energy sources in your workplace and home. Again, we have renewable sources, this becomes even more environmentally friendly to power these cars. Vote with your wallet, support companies that support EVs and their charging infrastructure. If I have a choice of a restaurant with a charger and one without, I'm going to go to the one with the charger, and then I'm going to mention to my server, hey, by the way, I'm here because of that charger out there, and thank you for putting that in. I appreciate that. I want to help out, you know, small businesses, and a lot of these chargers are installed at small locally owned businesses. So let's help them out, right? Other things you can do is get involved politically, of course, at your local, state, and federal levels, advocate for clean energy and electrified transportation options and for infrastructure. And again, we need to boost these numbers. When I bought my Chevy Bolt a little over 2 years ago, there were 110,000 vehicles registered in Broome County where I live. And of those, only 86 were electric. All right, we need to see that number increase significantly. So hopefully people will start buying these cars. Again, the future is bright. This is an interview I did with USA Today. It was kind of fun to do an interview with them, and I talk about how our kids have utilized charging. This is a charger at Taconic Falls State Park. We didn't actually need the charge, but again, always be charging. It was free. I figured we'd use it. I took a picture of it, and I was, you know, posted on Facebook, and somebody reached out to me, and they were from USA Today and asked if I could answer some questions. So I did an interview with USA Today back in 2019 and talked a little bit about my enthusiasm for EVs. So again, the future is bright. I mean, if you look in this driveway here, this is at my parents' house and this is at our house. We have more electric cars in the driveway than gas. The picture on the lower right at my house, all EVs. There isn't a gas-powered vehicle there. The picture on the left here is my cousin had gone out and bought a very expensive Tesla Model X, and it was driving back home and stopped to see us. He really helped us get the ball rolling with, oh, hey, like we can afford one of these. We can do this. But again, we're seeing these more and more. Look around and you'll see a lot of options out there. So talking about those options, what are they? Well, Ford Mustang Mach-E. There's, again, as a Ford fan, as an automotive fan, there was definitely some controversy in my head that you took a crossover and you called it a Mustang. But I've driven one of these, and I can tell you this thing handles like a Mustang, is fast like a Mustang. I think it's earned the name Mustang. But this is one of those ones that Ford put out, and they created this meme as part of their social media campaign that I thought was funny. It really is insanely quick, fun, and is a crossover SUV. So this is a great option. And again, I've driven this car, phenomenal handling and fast and everything else. It is pretty cool. This is the Ford I'm most excited about. Again, this is a Lightning. There is a video here you can check out if you'd like, showing how much weight these things can tow. They're rated to tow 11,000 pounds. You can power your house with it. You're a contractor. Again, contractors can power, they don't need a generator anymore. You use this to power the work site. You use it to power your house in a power outage. You don't have an engine in the front. So you can see in this picture, that's a frunk with electrical outlets and storage. You can even make this into a cooler. You have a drain plug in it, so you could throw ice in there, throw drinks in there, and it will keep it cool. And then you can tailgate out of it. So it's crazy, the innovation. They have that bi-directional charging capability, 230 to 300 miles of range. Huge frunk, 0 to 60 times in under 4 seconds for a full-size truck that looks like every other F-150 on the road. So I'm very excited about this vehicle. And the cool thing is the price. The 230-mile range F-150 starts at $40,000, and that is before state and federal tax incentives, which means if you were to buy one of these, as long as your dealer didn't mark it up, if you got it at MSRP at $40,000, you'd get $7,500 off for the federal tax credit and $2,000 from New York State right off the top, which means you could have an electric F-150 with 230 miles of range, bi-directional charging for $30,000. Which is cheaper than the gas-powered one. Like it's insane to think that. And what this truck has in terms of capability over the gas-powered one is amazing and astounding. And again, this is a guy that owned 2 F-150s in the past, including our last F-150, which we had for 7 years and put like 100,000 miles on. I loved the truck. It was great. I just didn't want to pay for gas anymore. So Ford has come up with that solution. So again, if you're interested, you need a pickup, you work, you live in a rural area, you feel like you can't go without a pickup, this is a pretty good option. This is another cool option. This is called the Rivian R1T. Again, in an interest of time, I'm not going to show you the video, but They have a motor at each wheel, which means they can do some phenomenal things. They are very expensive. Yes, they start at about 70, close to 70,000 before incentives. So you could get it around 60,000 with tax incentives, but they can do this thing called the tank turn. Check it out on YouTube, put in tank turn, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's crazy. They also come with this kitchen. This is an all electric slide out kitchen option you can get with the truck. So if you're a camper like I am or an outdoor enthusiast, you can camp on the tent there and slide out your kitchen in the morning and cook your food. I mean, it's unreal. They do the technology and the things that these things are capable of is incredible, and it's allowed because it's an electric powertrain. If you're looking for the best bang for the buck, this is a phenomenal option. This is called the VW ID4. Starts it again at 42,000 before tax incentives. Has a decent charge rate of about 150 kilowatt hours. And right now, if you buy one of these from VW, they'll give you 3 years of free charging at their Electrify America network, which is pretty widespread across the country and growing. So you could be traveling for free on VW's dime for the first 3 years of ownership, unlimited mileage. I mean, it's insane. Great deal if you were to buy one of these. It's a small crossover. And again, the price with incentives, especially even without incentives, total cost of ownership, this car ends up being cheaper than like a comparable gas-powered RAV4 or Ford Escape. So really good option there. This is another good one, the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Again, small crossover SUV, a little more money, but the exciting thing is how fast it charges. It's got a 350 kilowatt charge rate, which is meant to be used at those Electrify America stations, which means you can go from 10 to 80% state of charge in 18 minutes. Super fast and a very good price. So another option. And then I'm not even listing all the ones that are available. There's many. Best bang for the buck, though, is a used, Bolt EV. These are two examples of Bolts up here. Those are extremely good prices right now. You can buy one of those. Again, 240 to 260 miles of range. There is a battery recall for those, and I can answer questions that you might have about that later on. But that's a very affordable option. My parents purchased one of these. This is a Ford Focus Electric. You were able to buy these now for $6 or $7 grand because they have about 117 miles of range. It's not a huge range. They do have fast charging, so you could charge them up at DC fast chargers, but this is more of a compliance car. They're harder to find. There's not as many of them out there, but Ford built them from 2012 all the way to about 2017. But the nice thing about them is they're very cheap and they would make a phenomenal around town car, which is the way my parents use it. It's used for their around town driving. And it is a very, very affordable option. And the batteries are liquid cooled and will last for a very long period of time. So again, 6 or 7 grand for a Ford Focus Electric. Bolts, you're looking at around 15 grand for used prices. So again, if it were me, I would buy a Tesla. A lot of people worship Elon. I know, the man, the myth, the legend. He's done things that I don't really care for, but at the same time, you can't deny that he really has pushed the envelope. I mean, he comes up with these crazy ideas and he makes them happen. Like he took his original Tesla Roadster and put it on a SpaceX rocket and launched it into space, and they got this picture. Like, this is an actual picture. It's not faked in any way. They put it into orbit or blasted it out off of the planet on a SpaceX rocket. Like, there is no better car commercial than that. Like, they don't have a marketing department because they don't need one. Like, you do things like that gets you a lot of press. So Tesla, like I said, they've got a lot of options. The Model S is, the fastest car in the world right now. It is a very expensive car for the Plaid model, 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. When people say, oh, you bought a Tesla, how can you afford that? This is the car they're thinking of. These cars are expensive. They are 100 grand. Yeah, obviously. They go 420 miles of range. They have all-wheel drive, but that was that video I showed you at the beginning. 0 to 60, 1.9 seconds. It makes, it just accelerates extremely fast. This is the everyman's car. This is the car I have, the Tesla Model 3. Still very quick, 0 to 60, 3.2 seconds, almost 360 miles of range. You can buy the short range version, like Jess mentioned that they had bought. Those short range versions now start at brand new about 45 grand. They used to be about 35 grand before the part shortages ended up causing price increases. And then they just have so much demand that the price went up to about 45. However, you can get a long range all-wheel drive version for about 51 grand right now, if you want the longer range and the all-wheel drive. So that's an option. The Model X is the larger SUV. Again, 3 rows of seats. And this is very fast, 400 miles of range. This is the gullwing doors and everything. It's fancy, and that is over 100 grand, but still pretty cool. This is the other car we bought, was the Model Y, 3 rows of seats, seat 7, 330 miles of range or so, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. And again, also all-wheel drive, small crossover. This is things they're coming out with, the Tesla Cybertruck, which very polarizing look. I will admit wasn't a huge fan at first. It's grown on me a little bit. It's still a little crazy. I like the fact it looks kind of like a DeLorean, which I loved the DeLorean as a kid. But this truck is insane and can do crazy things. However, if you wanted to order one of these, there's 1.3 million orders right now at this point, which means even if you ordered today, it's going to be 5 or 6 years of production before you finally get it. So they are being built hopefully by the end of this year, but just something you'll start seeing on the streets. Bulletproof, rust-proof, stainless steel construction, bulletproof glass. It's just insane what this thing can do. It's made out of the same stuff that space rockets are. So Tesla ATV also went along with this. They're now getting into hopefully producing these. They made a kid version of this for Christmas this year, but this is another option where they might start moving into the recreational vehicle realm. The new dream for me, though, is this car. This is Tesla's Halo car that hopefully will be coming out by 2023 or so. It does 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds, 620 miles of range. It's the new Tesla Roadster, stupid fast. If you go on YouTube, you can see some of the videos. I think that is the best looking car I have ever seen. The other thing they're doing is moving into the larger world of Tesla Semi is being created, where they're able to tow large loads over 500 miles of range. That should hopefully be coming. If not, it didn't come there. They produced them, some of them in a small extent. Hopefully we'll see a ramp up in 2022 here. But when you put all those together, what do you get? Sexy cars. Yeah, the people at Tesla are a little boyish and immature, but that's why they did that nomenclature. They couldn't do Model E, interestingly, because Ford had a naming right on that. So that's why they went with Model 3 instead. But there you go. Again, for me, this company is what I'm most excited about. And that's why this is the poster that's hanging on my wall. It's not the Lamborghini Countach anymore. It's this. Will I ever own this? No, probably not. Okay, but one can dream, and this is the dream for me. This is, what makes electric vehicles so exciting. I hope you guys have found this interesting. I hope you've gotten something from this. And again, if you should at any point have any questions, you can always email me. I put my email up there. Feel free to email, call my office. I would be happy to answer questions. If you would like to see and ride in an electric vehicle in person, email me and I can arrange a time, or call my office, and I would be happy to meet with you and show you the vehicle, give you a chance to sit in, ask more questions, check it out in person. I really think that there are some phenomenal opportunities with this car. So does anybody else have any questions on anything? Any questions out there? No? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we will have this up on a Green Team YouTube page at some point. I will, try to get links out there on Bronco Connect or wherever. I know it's a lot of talking, a long time. I really do appreciate your time. Your time is valuable, and thank you for sitting through this. And again, if you should have any questions, email, call, and I would be happy to answer them. And thank you again, everyone. Have a great day.
You too, Eric. Thank you.